Last year, I watched and ranked 50 analog horror series, from the big names in Local 58, the Monument Mythos and the Mandela Catalogue, to the less well-known like Somnium Dream Viewer and the Red Sun Archive. This year we're doing it again. I got suggestions, I asked for more, I went scouring through Reddit looking for 50 new entries. I threw them into a spinning wheel, randomized the order, and we'll get to that, because for now, before we get to them, I want to quickly catch up on the shows from last year that have gotten new content. Skip ahead if you just want the new stuff, the timestamp has been on screen for a little bit now. I'm not going to go on the whole explanation of what analog horror is again, I mean this is a long enough video. You should know what it is by now. Go watch the first video if you haven't. Local 58 has only put out one new episode, shocker I know, but it came like right around my first video, so I'm 100% claiming to be the cause as I'm kind of a badass. Nightwalkers is a new episode and it's very solid. Not my favourite Local 58 by a decent margin, but a great way to start this marathon as it retains the fundamentally solid groundwork of the series. What gets me most is that I immediately identified the creature had two faces, so I had the full expectation that that would be the big reveal. So I was caught off guard by the rest of the body. It's such an obviously unusual shape that it takes your mind away from thinking about the rest of her. And the last words, a predator cannot differentiate from prey and accomplice, safety in numbers. Fantastic, no notes. So I gave the painter a light frying last time, but people told me the new episode was actually good. So let's talk about Hell. This episode definitely starts off better and has a much stronger core to it, actually having some moving parts which I find far more compelling, with like the guy holding the camera looking around. The constant censoring of things added an unsettling undercurrent to not quite knowing the extent of the major viscera, though it gets very repetitive and eventually it kind of falls into the painter trap of just feeling like over explanations of excessive gore for the sake of it. And for goodness sake, please stop trying to sell the artwork as photographs. It's really nice artwork. It's not a photograph. By the 4-minute mark, I was getting a bit tired of the repetitive, droning nature of things. Then there's the bit with all the paintings, where honestly, I could live with just seeing those, but the tape goes on to discuss the exact details of every victim, and I feel like this almost takes away from the interesting part of the painting framework of the show, that could leave the state of the victims and how they died somewhat up to interpretation the more abstract the artwork gets. But no, in general, there's just over-explaining. I think an example of the small but repeat problem is when they go from this interview to the footage of the house, and it says that this guy was the first to respond since he was the first in the area. An unnecessary extra detail that explains the above which didn't need explaining. My mental energy was taken away from the in-moment spookiness to the words here for long enough that the tension was broken a bit. This issue is present throughout the whole series, and it's another problem I have with the painter. Anyway, to give credit where it's really due, the ending of the episode is genuinely really good. The footage from the cop going in, or even the interview itself, genuinely get the heart rate going. In particular, the screams from Tina and how they continue on to the end. Genuinely unsettling, even if the killer's face fading into the screen was just funny. This is scary, this is good, I like this, more of this episode in general. There's gonna be one more episode I hear, and as of recording this, I don't know if it's already out. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm surprisingly kinda looking forward to it. Midwest Angelica continues to be one of the best analog horror projects out there in terms of pure visual design. And honestly, these latest 2 episodes have genuinely given me that extra horror experience I think the show was lacking. In fact, I'd maybe be willing to move the show into the S tier depending on how it ends. There are so many great shots, masterfully done graphics, expert understanding of less is more, without falling into the not uncommon analog horror trap of thinking nothing at all is more. There are some fantastic looking scenes, great visuals all around. Paradise genuinely freaked me out at times. I think this character got me attached enough that I was in full dread mode when he filmed himself sleeping. Like just that knowledge that whatever happens he won't be able to defend himself. And then he and the only other major character at the time, Churchill, both die right before the finale of Act 2. Which as of writing this isn't out yet, because I'm getting an extremely early start on this project. I will go back and add more of it out before I start editing though. Man, Midwest Angelica is just so goddamn good. Apostles was a bit confusing at times, mostly because I'd not watched the series since the first time, but man, Angelica is fantastic. I'm genuinely annoyed this isn't more popular because this is some alien horror that I wish more things did. I already talked about Angel Hair Season 3 in my 2024 new media videos, but man, I love it. I appreciate Angel Hair so much as a series, and just, man, it's just so freaking good. Every single shot with our characters has so much personality. There's so much creativity. I love the season for going for this sort of PC adventure game aesthetic instead of just a spooky NES or Genesis game as you normally get. I just don't have the words, man. Kamael is great and deserves love. The series continues to be stylistically perfect. I love the characters. I love how Gabby's rogue cap and Zaggy's helmet have feathers and wings that sort of evoke their ears. I love the map opening up into a hand. English fails me. I think there's something so special about religious works that break through barriers of belief and can be enjoyed by all groups. I will say, if a 4th season happens, which as of writing this I don't know, I'd be very curious to see how a 3D Angel would go. I'm mostly thinking this because when Gabby and Zaggy are in the televisions, they're entirely motionless, which is completely expected as they're in 2D. I can't help but wonder what a slightly more modern, like early 3D game or early 3D show would be like, and whether they would feel weird constantly moving. I don't know, weird tangent. I love this show, and I'm all for seeing more. It was also asked what lessons were learnt from the 6 discs. As far as I'm concerned, pretending to be someone you're not may make it easier to talk to others, but it stops you from really connecting with them. Friends don't act with each other. That's not what makes them friends. Additionally, neglecting to take care of yourself makes you less adequate at taking care of others. That one I think was the more obvious one most people got, and it's very much the strongest theme from the season, but I do also think there is something to be said for the first message there, of the difference between talking to someone and connecting to someone. Very good season, much love. And hey, East Patch, you commented on my last video, so if you're looking for like an M-list YouTube personality for free to voice act, I do dabble in being an idiot. And voice acting, but mostly in being an idiot. Also, closed hand map kinda looks like a capsicum. The Forgotten Humanoid is by far my favorite episode of Basswood County Analog Horror. That's not its full name. It has some good additions to the lore of the show, it actually gives some degree of story for once, and some of the actual footage segments are pretty damn creepy. It still has some series-wide issues in my opinion. There's some spelling errors that take me out of it. There's a few of those then a PNG happens moments that could have been handled better, and more trying to pass off what's obviously not real as real footage. I still would love to see Darkmind work with someone who can bring the artwork to life in these scenes better. Not with AI, just in general, even if they're mostly in silhouette form. This is still a big improvement though, and I want to see the series continue to grow like this. I mean, that ending is genuinely really fucking creepy. Unraveling Part 1 is creepy as shit. Like, just this one TikTok on repeat with small changes and alterations happening at multiple times, which genuinely got to me. Seeing the intruder in the reflection at multiple times, the sudden darkness at the end, the voices. And probably best of all is taking this 4-minute video of a single shot and ending it with just the camera turning in silence is freaky as hell. In fact, I think the latest entries, including Part 2 of Unraveling and Cognito Hazard, might be the most genuinely scary episodes of Mandela Catalog to memory. Throughout, I was fully tense. Narratively, I don't think I got much. I believe Unraveling 2 is trying to show that copying the media an alternate is in, weakens them as they degrade, having to stretch themselves between copies. And I think Cognito Hazard is showing the counter to that as alternates take to the internet where this isn't a big deal. But the genuine horror of watching a video and seeing it slowly unravel and break apart before cutting seconds before a jump scare would happen, of being hunted by someone right outside your home as you are trying to stop it with degrading VHS tapes, unable to do anything but wait for programs to finish working in an attempt to survive, and of being alone with no moderator help on a chat board as someone you've never met starts revealing personal information about you that they would only know if they were somewhere close to you, is absolutely felt. Especially that one, which might be one of the best examples of successfully modernizing analog horror, or kind of modernizing. The concept is more modern even if the specific chat is a decade old. People revealing they have your sensitive info online and spreading it is a genuinely scary thought in this day and age, and that context makes the blurred out pages of text at the end extremely unsettling. So very scary actually. Color me surprised. Well played, Alex. I won't burden you with more interpretations of seemingly random visuals, but every entry in Unorthodox Kitten continues to stir my mind and get my creative juices flowing. I will note some people accused me of, pretentiousness in describing Unorthodox Kitten. That concept of, oh, what if humans were insignificant, and how often that's used, but that's not really the point. The point was the two questions it asked that I and a lot of people have never really considered in relation to cosmic entities like these painters. It asks, what if you were in the shoes of the painters? How would you describe yourself to quantitatively inferior dimensional beings? How would you explain depth to a picture? And how would humans of the future explain what they are to the people of now? What if we met people from billions of years in the future and we never knew? That's what gets me. Still love this series. It kind of makes me imagine a sci-fi story where it turns out the stars in the sky are actually the population of mankind after ascension, gazing backwards into the past. That could be interesting, I don't know. Yeah, big fucking shock. Backrooms Found Footage 3 is a masterpiece. Maybe my favorite one so far. It's so believable. Kane perfectly pulls off the trick of making our protagonist feel like he might be real. He acts real, he talks a lot, he yammers to himself until a threat appears and he starts being more quiet. The feeling of isolation is increased by how much he talks, because you feel like you're engrossed into his point of view, and thus like these are your own thoughts. When it all goes quiet, it's like the only thing you had with you is gone. The ending with the other person that could be talked to but not seen or touched showing up, emphasizing the place being a glitch in reality, is perfect. Perfect. No notes. Vita Canis only has a few new episodes, but they're banging. First Contact is a wonderful video that finally gives some proper intrigue to the narrative, which was my biggest issue with Vita Canis overall. The singularities are fascinating, they talk back, they represent each species' behavior. And their intrigue in human technology and electronics is incredibly neat. I'm very curious to see where this goes and how much the singularities actually want to help and how much they're using us. And the latest episode was also really good. The host of Influence is a genuinely freaky creature, and I think it's handled really well. But the episode in between, Terminal Rally. This is in the same league as Local 58's You Are on the Fastest Available Route and Tape 12 of Greylock in terms of sheer terror to me. This guy locks himself in a room to do an experiment with a mimic, and I think when he turns on the baby monitor and the creature realizes this, everything goes awry. We get an extensively long viewing experience as this guy slowly goes mad, locked in this one room unable to escape, forced to wait 20 days for help to come. He realizes he has an elder mimic in the house, what I'd previously called the least scary and most cliche creature in Vita Canis. Here it's terrifying. We only get glimpses, but they are great. The first shows it waiting for him at the hall. The second shows him waiting at the door. The third we see it prying the door open. The creature could kill our man at any time it wants, but chooses to wait. Because it can. Because it knows that he will eventually come out himself, and it doesn't need to waste the energy breaking in. Nobody is going to come help him. It can trick the motion detectors by going so slowly that they don't pick it up. It uses that to try and lure him out. It speaks his own voice back to him to make him go mad. We don't just see our protagonist going loopy, we also get to experience the hunting cycle of the Elder Mimic from the perspective of the prey. It knows it can't be injured by this guy. It knows that it doesn't need to waste energy breaking the door down. It moves slowly, nearly tricking him to running into its clutches twice over. And then when that doesn't work, it uses the mimic part to psychologically torment him until he gives in and runs out. It learns about him as we learn about it, and that is terrifying. You want this guy to live, and watching him talk himself in and out and making that mistake of running out there, hoping at every corner he can wait it out and cope with what's happening, is breathtaking horror. You find yourself saying, don't do it, you're halfway there, there's only 5 more days, only 4 more days, only 1 more day left, until he tells you that it's been 20 days, and nobody is coming. All hope is lost. We hear every sound as he gets crunched to death off screen, eventually seeing his body as the video ends. This is horror. This is truly, genuinely horror of a high order. Terminal Rally would be among my favorite episodes of analog horror maybe ever, and of the ones where that's because of horror itself and not story, top contender. I ain't got much to say about Night Owl. I mean, I remain the same in terms of my thoughts. There's some decent episodes in the new batch, but nothing really stoked the fires of my interest. I feel like these new episodes mostly retread the same ground, but it's not entirely a bad thing. The themes of the show, the way large groups indoctrinate people into hate and use the differences of others to motivate hatred. Yeah, there was an interesting lore dump in the series with the big creatures. I assumed it was called Bemyaza, named after the apocryphal fallen angel, but it actually seems to be named Yaldabaoth. Though perhaps they're different members of the same group, or it's the same creature with 2 different names. Yeah, it's still a fine show. I enjoyed the new stuff. My final thoughts for the hopefully brief bit of retreading old ground is that a lot of these actually fix some of my criticism with the series, which I'm not taking any credit for. I doubt it had anything to do with me. Mandela Catalog moving away from the analog style and not being all that scary due to having so much religious horror, well, those last 2 episodes went back to form and were terrifying. Vita Canis having little story, well, its episodes blended story and horror great. The Painter being shit? Well, this latest episode wasn't shit. Midwest Angelica got scarier, Basswood County got more variety, so on. That said, we can now jump to the new stuff. Let's go, I'm sure that's what people really want. Baddington's Harmony and Horror was one that I had intended for last year, but it seeped through the cracks. I guess I can say it's nice to have some big numbers left over for this time though. Harmony and Horror is obviously going to get some comparisons to Nancy McGrumer's FNAF VHS series and Mr. Wall's Walton Files, and I think those are fair, but surprisingly, I think Harmony and Horror managed to come out looking pretty damn good even relative to the competition. Which says a lot, I think, given Walton Files got top tier. On its own merits, Harmony and Horror begins out the gate with a few pretty notable advantages. It has full 3D animation going on the whole time, which means it can do things that some other analog horrors can't. While this does end up with it inevitably feeling less like analog horror at times, Paddington knows full well the importance of going back to basics and keeping that ingenuity through limitation element that defines the genre. As well, I think the security camera feed based horror, if I could call it anything that defined the first 3 FNAF games, is used expertly here. Weird anecdote, but I remember being freaked out when I was younger by that one moment in Beast Wars where Dinobot sneaks up on the camera, itself a POV of a security camera, and that particular vibe of horror is used really well. A lot of found footage is naturally handheld and so overall hectic. Paddington does use this, for instance when the dog and girl fuse into one being, which is genuinely fantastically handled, but taking the moving away from a thing and then moving back to an element and taking that on its own gets you this security camera horror. You know that something's going to change at some point, the camera going back and forth, you're never quite sure what's going to appear or change or move, and that's genuinely really unsettling at times. Harmony and Horror knows how to use horror and suspense really well, not allowing itself to become too focused on, let's just make the animatronics creepy looking, or in this case dolls and toys. While that still is a feature for sure, the horror doesn't begin and end at this PNG of Henry with his eyes missing. I will have to criticize the reliance on jump scares throughout the series though. Not because I think jump scares are inherently an immediate no-go. Jump scares are very easy to use poorly for sure, but I don't want to write off a series purely for having them in a vacuum. Some jump scares are excellent even in this show. I mean, I just glazed that one Vita Canis episode that has plenty of admittedly silent jump scares. No, it's just that sometimes random jump scares happen in Harmony and Horror that take away from the suspense and make you go, oh, okay. Of course that's what it was all leading to. But for every bad jump scare, there's some genuinely well done horror. And where I think the series both stands out more and ends up losing some identity is its similarities to its source material. Five Nights at Freddy's is primarily the story of a man who goes on to become a mass killer, with tantamount to all of his children being killed as a direct result of his actions. However, it's hard to really feel much for a lot of the characters because they're barely even characters. Elizabeth Afton has a few lines in Sister Location, Michael too, William himself is barely a character in the games and his wife is less than that. The only character I really have investment in is the crying child, because you play as him in one of the games. Now, while Harmony and Horror can absolutely be seen as less original with its similar take on what if this guy who makes animatronics, dolls, went off his rocker one day and for supernatural reasons became a child murderer, turning the kids into puppets, with his main distinction being that he was the very direct killer of his family. It has one huge advantage that I think blasts through that lack of innovation. It improves on the formula it used immensely thanks to one word: character. Every member of the Greywinder family gets so much character, even its equivalent to FNAF's Henry Emily. It's something I said for Walton Files too. Letting us get to know the people who would become these quote-unquote monsters makes it a lot more tragic, horrifying, and engaging. It gives a lot more personality to the mascot entities we're faced with. I know something about Henry, an abused kid who seems to think innocently enough to have believed his father loved him. The two little girls who end up being turned into these horrific things are believable. We get to see some genuinely chilling moments of horror as their father Martin gets closer and you know is going to kill them. There's a very primal and raw fear to that thought of the people you care and trust most betraying you in this way. The people you would let your guard down around the most. And Harmony and Horror is expert at preying on that. It is a terrifying series for all the right reasons, being, in my opinion, what I'd say is one of the scariest analog horrors just for those scenes in the home that focus on Martin the Killer. Why did I have to call him Martin the Killer? Now I won't be able to take him seriously. Where I will have to say the series falls a little flatter is in some of the story elements. I think at times I was a bit confused. I will admit, I think a lot of the story early on was revolving around the question of who was in what puppet and what happened to that. The story of the present day, moving on, is currently being expanded with Season 2, with the big 30-minute episode that last dropped being some masterful work that makes me so excited to see how this series continues. The genuinely great elements of horror and high-quality overall production, combined with how well it manages to get across a sense of character in these dolls, is highly worth praising. Though weighed down by severely poorly implemented jump scares, a ho-hum story, and just personally, some not really good VHS overlays at times that can really break the illusion, I think a solid A tier is fair. It's a good show. I've really got no idea what to say about Skycorp. There's a point where horror goes from scary to funny, and it's those who know the line and choose to cross it that make the funniest of this kind. Skycorp is well aware of that line and clearly makes a choice to just be silly. For that I respect it, and some of these videos can be really funny. Does that make it good though? Yeah. I'll be honest, I have very little to say. Any criticism I have is built on how this is a channel you can't really binge watch. The comedy kind of wears out its welcome after long enough, and there's a lot of episodes. But I just have so little to say. B tier for comedic value alone, I'd say check out whatever video has a title that makes you chuckle, I guess. Right, so I am checking out some one-shot analog horrors this time. I didn't last time because I felt it was a bit unfair to compare one episode series to like full-length ones. But now that I've actually sat down and watched some of these one-shots, I think it's actually fairly reasonable when they're meaty enough on their own. This one, for instance, is 20 minutes long, which is longer on its own than some of the ones from my first video that are multiple episodes. And I think it's a big difference between analog horror series, or maybe web series in general, and other larger scale productions, is when they can decide how long they're going to be, they know how to pack that time, and that does help them feel more complete than some other full-length shows. October 31st, 2000 presents a scenario where on that date, something causes some manner of outbreak of child death in the US. It's some pretty dark stuff, when it starts ramping up, it gets quite intense. I really like the ending here. It's genuinely pretty creepy and has some great moments of understanding less is more. Moments where all we see is a black and white photo of a child over silence, where the fear comes in from the unknown of whether it's a child or a threat. That unnatural feeling of seeing a child as potential danger is strong here, and the idea that you're watching the tape of the person who just happened to be the last one left in the US as the contagion swarmed in is pretty scary too. Where my issues lie with this video are in the writing and the build-up. The build-up is very solid, sure, but it takes a while. It feels a bit boring at the start, basically the opposite problem a lot of analog horrors have where they have no build-up when doing this style. And the writing has a few really corny and weird things. I mean, there's one point where a government-issued alert uses the terminology gun down to refer to children being shot on the street. That kind of stuff took me out of it a few times. I'll say, still a solid B tier though. I think it's really quite good, but it could have been better.
Really let me know. Boost that engagement. Get out there and get spiteful. Fuck it, I don't care.
So, Spaceman Scott. It would have been fucking great if someone told me this guy existed before my last video. I think I was making the first video when I got this recommended to me a lot, and I was just staring at it like, well, shit, sunk cost fallacy, I can't just not make my video now. I avoided watching it so I could prevent being influenced by whatever he said, and now that I have, well, he did an analog horror at the end, so now I'm gonna harshly judge his entire existence! I'm kidding, of course, it's really not that big a deal. J. Walker Investigation Tapes, if that is even your real name, is basically just a few tapes from Mr. Douglas Walker detailing a few photos he got developed from a camera connected to a case. It's very simple, and I can appreciate that quite a lot. I really liked how not all of the images were obviously messed with, and as I started looking closer to spot the creature thing guy, it made the more obvious ones that blasted it in your face more of a silent jump scare deal, really quite well done. Though I'll say minimally innovative, it's also kind of repetitious. His name starts with J. Douglas's comments are fine, but I never engaged with the character being put forward. He really felt more like a tool for getting those creepy images in. The ending is kind of neat, namely just the 15th and 16th images that are pretty creepy, and then it ends. I understand why, but it felt a bit unsatisfying. I feel like it's really easy to see what's coming way in advance, and without an ending beyond, anyway, the guy who is not the killer is probably going to get convictionated, leaves it a bit, as a conclusion. So probably, let's say a B tier given the context of what it is. Speaking of...
End audio transcript.
Please, I'm begging you, listen to me! This is worth the public unrest! This could be—
Yeah, I don't know what to call this one. This is better and also worse than Astronaut Scott's first go. The horror is more existential, more so just like the concepts demonstrated and then the idea that governments wouldn't do anything to help us. That's cool, that's great, pretty sure I've heard this general concept from the 3 Body Problem series. That's not Scotty Too Hotty's fault though. I think this one is simple, but it works. I may have little to say. Voice acting's good, very kind of simple, honestly feels like one entry in a larger overall analog horror series, if that makes any sense. I think a one-shot probably needs a bit more than one lengthy audio recording and one silly little starting bit to feel whole. It's not bad, probably also a B tier, and I respect the dedication to do this. In fact, if this video drops and around the same time my lad here does another 24th series and closes the gap so that he's only a solid like 28 shows behind me, I'll be interested to see what's done next. Am I going to do this myself? Probably not. Probably not. You know, I have to ask, is there any reason why the Tryred and Needle Mouse segment of this video was swapped around? I mean, you can see the tier list in the back. These were filmed in reverse order to how they're shown. Trinity of Heaven hasn't even got 1,000 views as of writing this, but I think it has a really cool premise and reveal. I really don't want to spoil it though, because I think it's worth checking out, and most of you likely haven't. And honestly, a lot of you might still not even go watch it after seeing this. The way I'd put it is simple but effective. It's coherent enough to follow easily, and its ending is well worth the 16-minute runtime. I genuinely quite enjoyed it, though it's not what I'd call a real standout groundbreaker. For the size of the channel though, pretty cool. Some of the animation at times even had a Walton file sort of feel to it, which I'm always down for. Probably another solid B tier, very good stuff.
Long square, gambling fuel. Well,
the surrealist existential analog horror comedy musical was not on my bucket list, but I feel like something I've always needed has been given to me. Mikaeli hitting metal is a pure work of art, starting as repetitive comical dubbing of a German game show that has randomly become Russian. It slowly devolves into an existential horror about the game show being a simulation world where people get trapped. Mikaeli starts off hitting metal 17 times to own photograph of Motorcar, and then being arrested for owning something because communism joke, which is pretty funny, yes, but by the end the plot entirely twists so that the heroes become the villains turn out to be the heroes, the real world and simulation world intertwine, and it ends on a surprisingly emotional and bittersweet note that's actually pretty strong once you realize what's happened. But most importantly, it knows how to make you laugh. It has top banter, funny jokes, and some pretty good black comedy that airs on the safe but still funny line of offensive. Because it opens that gate, the actual horror moments do feel more impactful and leaves it constantly entertaining. Plus, 4 musical numbers including a fucking I Want and Villain song, and their bangers? What can I say? This is great. However, watching through it a second time does make it a bit more clear that some of the story elements feel really poorly implemented. There are some moments that just feel out of nowhere, and even on a rewatch are just kind of confusing. And while I do like some elements, in particular, it kind of raises this interesting question of what if every game show you've ever watched turns out to have been a simulation the whole time, and none of it was really real? Because, you know, not only are these things often kind of scripted, at least I imagine so, I don't fucking know, but also most people don't really know anyone that shows up in any kind of game show, so there is that element of what if? And I want to give this an S tier, I really do. But actually watching through it multiple times, it does become clear some of the more egregious flaws that kind of hold it back. Those elements of storytelling that just do not really fit in. So while it is a proper series, and I do kind of love it, I have to just say A tier. Long live the blowjob machine, I am happy. Stretch Smiles is a series about skinwalkers, and not like actual Navajo skinwalkers, but about the general internet boogeyman version born from our collective inability to respect the beliefs of others. Oddly enough, it looks a lot like the monster from Extro. Anyway, as an analog horror series, it's perfectly decent. I think it's solid. Though only about 8 episodes, and not enough is packed in those episodes to make a satisfying whole. It's still very much in the process of coming together. As it stands, I think it's pretty solid. There are a few nice moments. I like this animation here, and while the effect is a bit jank, the false owl bit is pretty good. I could see this being a great series with a bit more time. I'd also say with a better scares too. It's very much a victim of that and now it's spooky time effect that I mentioned sub-series can have last time, and rarely did I find them successfully spooky. I really wish I had more to say about Stretch Smiles. It's not a bad show at all, it's just kind of average, you know? It does some things well, but it's also just overall not particularly striking. And I feel like a bit too much of the horror can kind of be built on just be scared of this thing that looks weird. I'd say it's a decent series that makes a good effort. If it gets more episodes that work to enhance the story and spooks, I'd rank it higher. For now, I'll give it a generous B tier placement. Perfect Automation. Not sure what I was expecting, but I genuinely really like this one. It's fairly simple in concept. Here's a thing called Machine Boy. It's a singing and dancing robot made by a company and is heavily implied to have been once a person forced into this form that has lost his damn mind and become a monster. That's the main story throughout, kind of to its detriment. There's only a few installments, but they all tend to tell a very similar story so far. This thing's life sucks, it hates living. That said, it is a good basis for more in the future. In fact, I would love if people went to check it out after this video so the creator has enough support to continue. While I personally wasn't creeped out at times, I just didn't think the design was particularly creepy to me, I recognize this is probably really fucking uncomfortable for a lot of people, and even with it not personally ticking my scared as shit bone, I enjoyed the animation. It's very simplistic and basic, and I don't think it represents reality well, but it is very distinctive and has an uncanny valley feel, but not in the normal way. It's hard to explain. It reminds me a lot of Walton Files, in fact, and to compound that, there's also a 30-minute episode that, while having text that's really unfun to read, is mostly composed of a genuinely really good FNAF-style sequence that is very simple but also quite effective. It had me tense. The horror of this didn't always work, as I said, but this sequence got me. I was creeped out by this, and for as predictable as the ending was, I did like it. And the predictability was made up for by the great silhouetted sequence showing what the robot did to the man it attacked. The series is fairly simple when you lay it out like this. The story's basic, and the horror almost entirely revolves around, do you find this thing creepy? But it has so much potential, and I do think it shows off that creative spark in presentation that I like to see. I want to see more of this. It has issues in storytelling, and I think that repetitive nature does harm it, but I can put it in the A tier. Surprising myself, because I was expecting this to be a decent, but too revolving around the creepy design kind of series to engage me. But I liked it, I really did. This is kind of a special moment, I think. This is the first time any analog horror was recommended to me by the creator, and frankly, it's a lot of pressure. Not to get into it, but I think most reviews come in generally dealing with indie stuff like this under the assumption that it won't be seen by the creator. So there's often this disconnect between creator and creation that makes it easier to give criticisms because you don't know the person, you don't know they're watching. Anyway, this very short one-shot analog horror was made as a college project, and it has a lot of strengths. I think the initial concept of the creature in the analog horror itself being aware of the corruption is interesting, as well because he's not the cause or villain. It's kind of underused. I think there's a lot of potential there. There's also a few decent sequences. The live action one was a pleasant surprise, and the animation, while simple, is admirable. The story, I think it's fine. It's clearly about emotions and being consumed by the negative ones, with the antagonist representing, I suppose, intrusive thoughts and the like. My issues would come in a few places though. The probably unavoidable one, given the context of this project, is that the pacing is a bit fast. I don't think it had enough time for some scenes to breathe, and due to the one-shot nature requiring it to have a full story, the 5-minute runtime isn't enough for it to feel fulfilling. That part I do think is likely unavoidable, and in the creator's own future projects that may come to be will likely be one that gets fixed. What I'd say also needs some addressing are the following. Some of the text looks too clean, that is to say, it's often a nice crisp color that looks put on top of the VHS filter instead of being part of the tape itself. This is particularly noticeable near the end, as is the issues with the editing. That is to say, the interaction between the drawings and the real hands. It doesn't feel natural, and not in an intentional way. It looks unpolished. The effect of the hand reaching out the screen works for me though, and conceptually I think this conveyance is really cool. It also does fall into the common trap of, now it's spooky time, but I think in the context of a malicious character wanting to mess with the main character, it's fine. It does feel like the villain is purposely doing it to fuck with our boy. That said, some of the dialogue is maybe a bit too direct, and it lacks some subtlety with the crazy shaking, especially in the text. While this can come off as intentional from our villain, it does make the villain seem less creepy and intimidating, a bit too try-hard. That said, for what it is, I think it's decent. To end on a positive note, I think the two being drawings at first, then Max turning real, but the villain's appearance in reality returning him to a drawing, visualizing the thoughts overpowering and becoming more real as they go stronger, is really cool. I put this in C tier, but given the context of the project, I am willing to give some leniency and put it in the B tier. It is decent. The service! Very simple and very short, but also surprisingly effective. It's rare to get an analog horror that doesn't try to have a monster or do anything supernatural. It is as simple as someone accidentally catches a network they weren't supposed to, that leads to an extremely unsettling and chillingly believable representation of the worst of mankind. A seedy underworld that uses the kind of here and there dodgy language you'd expect selling what appear to be children, with descriptions that are really unsettling in terms of what they focus on. It's very short, but I think deeply effective. The channel actually has a lot of other one-shots that I might look at some point, but I was only pointed to this one, and I'm not sure if I have the room to slot more in. I have relatively little to say, except that this is genuinely really creepy. It tells a simple but perfectly acceptable story that gets the job done. A tier. I was genuinely unsettled.
What in the chimpy freaking cheeseburgers was that? You heard that, Robek.
Is that an actual practical fucking prop of the animatronic? That's fucking awesome. In fact, this whole series, while short, I really liked. It does the thing I'm not always for, where it goes from analog horror to just short film at times. Though this does look really fucking good with some great shots and cinematography. It doesn't feel like it's nearly as indie as the likes of Mandela Catalog or Monument Mythos when it comes to this kind of stuff. And while there's some loss of charm there, these moments are few and far between compared to all the other stuff. Chimpy Chippa does have everything I love about analog horror. It creatively uses its style to tell its story in a unique way. It has variety instead of finding one formula that works and just milking that. It has a creepy story that is engaging and has enough mysteries to get you curious without leaving you so lost you become apathetic. These episodes are just all so good. These episodes are great. They understand most of the stuff I complain about with analog horror stuff. Yes, there's the obligatory and now it's creepy time moments, but there's an explanation for them. It's reasonable because of how the spirits function. It has those short film scenes that aren't analog horror, but they're so well done and transition extremely well to and from the real stuff that it barely bothered me. The variety is great, from a cancelled sitcom that we got to see corrupted, to 911 calls that are quite unsettling without having to show us anything, to abstract visuals that convey all sorts of meaning, to these great camera footage scenes with Chippa himself, and the idea of this amalgamation of spirits that hide in the negative recesses of your mind, forcing people to end their own lives to try and get rid of them, able to get to you through simple eye contact. It's genuinely creepy stuff that may be among the most scary supernatural entities in analog horror. Because the idea is something that just needs eye contact and hides inside of people that you naturally will want to look in the eyes, or animatronics with designs so creepy that they draw your attention to their eyes, it's very good shit. I love this. It's so well presented that I think it represents everything good about the genre, down to that bookend of an ending that I think is frickin' sweet. I think my only issues would be, it's so obviously and blatantly Australian that the 911 number really caught me off guard. Like, mate, have some Aussie pride. You can put 000 and teach these Americanos something about our fuckwit country of assholes. There's definitely something to be said for how FNAF adjacent it gets, and that's definitely not something I think the series needed. And as I said, I'm not a big fan of when analog horror tries to go the way of short film. Yes, it looks good, but it's not what I'm looking for. I don't see these as huge issues, but they are problems. And I do see how someone could probably get a bit lost at a certain point and just kind of fall off the story it's telling, because it doesn't go in the direction you initially assume. I think the series is genuinely creepy and well made, and the story is fairly compelling given its length. I think solid A tier. And then I ignored my randomizer and just jumped into the creator's other analog horror that caught my eye. Clockwork Visitant. Only 3 episodes, but it may be one of my favourite analog horrors. The Clockwork Visitant is itself a fascinating creature to me. It's not a simple movie monster that kills you because why not, but more so something like the Barber or the Look-See, a creature that represents something about life. It arrives to people who aren't living their lives with value, who are choosing to either live a life causing suffering to others or stagnation. He is not a representation of physical death in the sense that a lot of creatures are, but more of a conceptual death, a representation of people who aren't really living life. For people who don't make something of their lives and don't fulfill and experience it for what it's worth. It supposedly brings feelings of intense need to change paths to someone. It makes you feel like you need to do something else, to do something that finds meaning for you. People who don't listen to that feeling, who fail to recognize that they're not really living their lives, become its victims. It does some stuff I'm not sure about that may contradict that. It's there during the bubonic plague and Salem witch trials, and it kills a few people who I don't think necessarily fit that bill, but in concept, I think that's really cool as explained in the end. And the way it kills by taking away the time in your life that you weren't using anyway, leaving you as a decomposed husk of a corpse, is really creative and genuinely terrifying. That and it just looks creepy. The way it melts out of walls that happen to have mounted clocks to enter rooms is scary as shit. This thing makes me uncomfortable. I am scared of this creature. It's so effective for that. And it's really just a guy in a suit with a clock for a head. I shouldn't be afraid of Dante's Australian cousin. And I think this series has some masterful usage of the analog horror stuff, with some of the short film parts even coming off like recreations made for documentaries. That's really cool. It helps the short film feel like it fits in the analog horror. Like it is in universe, not what's happening. It is, as I said, a recreation. The found footage parts look good, the documentary parts, it feels almost real. And a lot of that probably has to do with the entirely practical nature of the Visitant itself, who is a design that works perfectly in reality in my opinion, without potentially seeming a bit weird like even the Elder Mimic from Vita Canis that I glazed earlier. I have no complaints. The series looks excellent, it's extremely creepy, it tells a compelling story, I think it has a super unique and interesting main monster that is thought-provoking with meaning to it. It represents something which I think helps elevate any horror creature. Horror as a genre has a meaning. It shouldn't be interesting and entertaining to us, but it is. And it's that macabre setting where death is no longer taboo, that lessons and meaning normally beyond the pale of standard media can thrive. Horror can both be the benchmark to help us see the line between what is and isn't acceptable, as well as the proof of what value there is in the unacceptable. The Clockwork Visitant is one of the most thought-provoking monsters in any analog horror I've come across, as the operator made me ask what people in the shadows might be doing to influence my life without my knowing, and as the painters made me wonder how humans would convey ourselves to those too far above or below us for reality to apply equally. The Clockwork Visitant makes me question, at what point can one stop being called living even if they are alive? When is it too late to revive your life and continue on a path that will fill the time you take for granted with memories and people who give it value? S tier for me. Clockwork Visitant is one of my favorite series on this list currently. It's hard to say if it'll stay there, it is very short, but it made me think, and for that I do love it. I don't even know where to start with this one. I guess you can argue this shouldn't even be on the list, but I have seen the creator responding to comments calling the series analog horror without any correction, so all good. Really though, this is more of a Dreamcore series with a horror tone. Dreamcore being a stylized aesthetic that evokes a surreal, fuzzy, dream-like atmosphere. It wants to feel the way your memory remembers dreams, and in that regard, Sins of the Past both suffers and really benefits. As time goes on, I think the issues with the style begin to fade away. Where early on there was nigh unreadable text and incomprehensible dialogue, later episodes start to be more coherent without losing the fuzzy feeling entirely. While I understand the almost nonsensical feeling is a part of Dreamcore, I think the happy balance is what should be strived for when actively attempting to tell a story. Sins of the Past does eventually find that balance, and it has a story very much worth telling. Following the story of Charlotte Settle and her dreams as she tries to find out what happened to those around her, to understand her guilt, and to grieve those she's lost. It's an, at first, nonsense series that becomes really special with time. A once-in-a-lifetime flash of emotional beauty that really hit me eventually. It was that monologue of grief in dreaming that put it over the edge. It felt so raw, so genuine, so pure. Like a person really being there, expressing something that happened to them and how they felt. I welled up. I felt the tears coming. There is a humanity in this series that I think really stands out. As the pieces came together, I felt like to a degree the incredible confusion I had at first was worth it. I enjoyed this. I was enthralled. And it's weird to say because the first few entries really didn't capture me. I felt like I was watching out of obligation because I'm not sure why. Maybe this just wasn't a show I was in the mood to watch when I started it, which would very much not be Sins of the Past fault, or maybe those first few episodes just weren't my thing. But I can't help but recommend this series. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Surreal and beautiful in both regards, perhaps only failing in the horror element. However, I don't know if that's just because I am someone who finds more fascination than fear in the surreal and strange. I say this because I have seen people express that things like LSD Dream Sim are unnerving and creepy to them, while I don't feel that. So maybe this is just a kind of horror that doesn't tickle my fear response, but it might work for others. So I can't really knock the horror much. They didn't do anything wrong, and there's no, well, you were trying to be scary, but the main villain is a deformed image of the Peter Griffin death pose moment. They pulled off what they were going for fantastically, which is the metric I think it should be measured by, especially in terms of how scary it is. It's not their fault that I'm a fucking bozo. That said, it should be clear by now this is an S tier. S for all the sins Charlotte gets to enjoy in her dreams. Go watch it, because it's criminally underviewed. Okay, this might not really count as analog horror, but I thought it'd be a little fun to cover at least. It has all the hallmarks: recovered footage from cameras, news reporter narration, old-timey look. It just needs to mention everything is being recorded on tape to make it a shut case. So this one is the story of when the moon woke up and face-planted into the Earth. And then the rest of the solar system showed up, but there are only 3 of the gas giants. Neptune presumably has been taken into custody by its real owner, the Iris. And the smaller planets don't want to get the hands from Earth. And speaking of hands, as a series, I think the premise is pretty cool, and I like the animation in general from this creator, with some works that really get across massive scale. The moon waking up is a great concept, and when it crashes into Earth, that's an effective moment. I feel like there's something about the rest of it that doesn't really click. I guess it's the part where the humans are being infected too, and this implication that the planets are all infected with something making them alive, which I don't like nearly as much as them just being living things. I do quite enjoy some of the stuff from episode 3 though, like the satellites going into space and being attacked by moons is really cool, and anytime we see the view from Earth with the worlds in the sky like this, like that's wicked. I like the concept, I think it has potential, and I guess I do want to see where humanity goes from here. I'm not really feeling the story as is being told. There's not much in the way of characters, and the horror, I mean, it would be way scarier if the planets didn't look like annoying orange characters. Like, something about them feels more cute than actually scary. I mean, especially Uranus, he has Clodsire energy. I don't think it's bad, though. Like, this is a solid series currently. B tier, I think. That's a safe, yeah, I think that's a safe place to put it. And so we end up back in Manticore Land eventually. Eve has several series I never looked into, and Bodies of the Early Universe is one of the ones that I just chose not to include last time. But here I am, looking into another of her works. This one is notable, I think, for having some really gorgeous visuals. I really like Manticore's visual style, and I really enjoyed the ways in which Monument Mythos and Nixonverse visually portray things, and Bodies shares this trait in its own unique way. Bright lights and heavy gradient really capturing that ethereal yet colourful side of space that often gets overlooked in cosmic horror in favour of the dark empty void. It really pops, and it has some great ideas presented, like the early bodies being in some way alive, akin to children who play with their toys and manipulate them without any care. Cosmic horror that is neither unstoppable being who wants us dead, or ethereal unknowing creatures who barely acknowledge us, but rather curious things who manipulate and play with us the way we manipulate and play with atoms and molecules. It's fun, kind of similar to Unorthodox Kitten in that regard. But the real story of Early Bodies is not the cosmic horror, because if we're being honest, it's more about the main character, Lieutenant Colonel Ernesto, as he processes the grief of losing his family, suffering for years without recovering from it. What we're hearing is not an objective and undeniable view of those bodies, but Ernesto's interpretation of what is being seen in space. And there's some beauty in that, assuming I'm reading the show correctly. Ernesto's views on what he is observing ask the question of how much does he say is like based on fact, and how much is motivated and influenced by his grief and loss. And there's this interesting idea of like, why is this institute for observing early bodies made up of people who failed psych exams? Is a scientific view unvalued or inefficient for this sort of thing? Is it the abstract nature of these beings that means this is necessary? I don't know, and I don't believe there are answers here. I did like this. I'm not sure if it quite clicked with me the way Manticore's other works do. I never felt particularly creeped out, and while I did find it thought-provoking at points, I just don't know if the new context created quite felt like it meshed with what the first 2 episodes, like, really did in a way I wanted. I think if the series got more entries expanding it, I might feel different, or maybe it would be worse. Still, it's an A tier. I think it's good. Oh my god. The kid in the camera is just so good. This is a one-shot analog horror that's massively showing how to tell a full creepy story in a short span of time, with a meaning to it, with plot twists, and with real genuine terror. This is the story of a boy named Kalen and his camera which breaks. Everything past this is where it gets really good, and again, another case where I think if you haven't seen it, you should just go do it now. It's got plenty of views though, so most likely you have. What I think works so well is how this short plays on expectations. When Kalen encounters the Kip Seed, you obviously assume this thing's kind of evil, partly due to its brilliant design. You can see how it would come across as friendly and cute to some, especially children, but there's an unsettling nature that feels right out of an unintentionally creepy children's show. Extra help by its antennae, which sometimes peek over the window and look like eyes watching in, and by how subtly contradictory the creature is. He claims he's Kalen's sleep fairy, but then says he knows every child around. He claims to know all about Kalen, but not how the camera broke. He presumes to be real, but you can see briefly an unnatural slump. You can see a few glances that he's just not right, and not quite what he claims. You assume, based on his words, that this is allegorical for a creeper who has been watching the child. He knows the kid's name and uses that to lure the naive boy out. It's chillingly real. You also want to assume that the photos in live action are just done for the creepy factor, as this is a horror short. But then when he gets to the Kipsneed's home and you see Kaylin's real hand, that's when you begin to understand these live action photos aren't just for the creep factor. These are real photos in universe from the boy's camera. The narrator's voice drops at this point, like he knows what's going to happen. You assume the Kipsneed is a real person, but then you actually see it in a live action image. The short tricks you into thinking this is a real supernatural creature of some kind, building up as the shot gets closer and closer to Kaylin, having set you up to expect a creepy as stinger shot of the Kipsneed as some kind of horrific monster trying to eat him. And then this. No jump scare, no loud noise. An image that, with all the context and build-up, speaks 1,000 words. This made my heart sink and jump at the same time. I had expected this at the start, but the short tricked me at a point into thinking the Kipsneed was a real monster, a creature of supernatural origin, when the whole time it really was just a puppet used by a normal man who lured a child to his basement. The narrator seamlessly turns to the voice of a news reporter. We see this and nothing else. We don't know what happened here. The boy isn't claimed to be dead. There's no gory details. It leaves the worst blank spot it could. A blank spot for you to fill in with whatever fate you could imagine is the worst for the child. I was thoroughly, truly creeped out. I felt a primal, genuine fear as the reality of this short sunk in. And as much as I love the creepy supernatural entities like the Operator, False Gabriel, or the Clockwork Visitant, horror like this reminds me that reality is just as unsettling as what's made up. S tier. Just an S tier. I think this is a fantastic short. Is it not really analog horror? I think you could argue the case, but I think this is excellent work. You know, with all the variation and expansion of the genre, sometimes it's nice to just go back to the basics with ARCADIA TV. Now, while that may sound somewhat like backhanded of a compliment, I want to be clear that I like the basics of this genre. ARCADIA is a series that takes those simple foundations and makes something great with them, greatly demonstrating my belief that the limitations of the format can help breed creativity that may not have existed otherwise. This series has all the classic tropes present and accounted for. News broadcast, informational survival tapes, secret government video, newspaper article, found footage, some old style video game moment. Though in this case it goes for a classic text-based adventure, which I don't believe I've seen before, but that last video was a year ago, so I might have forgotten. My mind is going to the fucking text-based adventure from goddamn Saints Row 5 though. 4, Saints Row 4. ARCADIA has a great base concept. What if mankind opened a gateway to other universes and everything went wrong? It felt almost like a blend of surreal broadcast and Vita Canis. The former setup of holes between realities being breached, monsters coming through, and a big ultimate Unga Bunga thing we don't know about being present, and the latter's portrayal not of the inception of the event, but how humanity has responded to and tried to survive since it. Like America has set up a big fuck-off wall to keep most things contained and produce informational tapes to help people survive. Which of course doesn't always go well. It does have a story going too, which I think isn't mind-blowing, but it serves its purpose and is engaging enough in its own right. The mysteries build as to what's really going on, and I really love the notion that there were dozens of universes that heard the signal, but didn't respond. Either because they knew the consequences, or had already faced them. It's a good reveal, and I think the monsters were very interesting. It's almost SCP-like. Here's a dragonfish-sized thing in the deep water. Here are these fairy-like monsters that are attacking your home. Here is a sentient anomaly that lives within a Commodore 64 game. Here is a random celestial body claiming to be the one true god. It's all really good stuff, and this variety in monsters is something I've kind of been missing this watch through. Not to say it's necessary or that having one fleshed out and interesting entity is bad at all, but I do enjoy some variety at times, and it may just be that the timing of when I watched this relative to the rest has given it a favourable whiff of both fresh and nostalgic air at the same time. But I don't want to say that for sure, because I feel like wording it that way would take some credit away from what's genuinely a really well-made analog horror. And hey, it has a return to those classic horror elements as well. Nationwide alerts, the dread of the possibility of it happening, some deep-sea horror, which you always love to see, multiple in-home invaders that are extremely well done, and some general cosmic existential horror. This series may be a bit scattershot in that regard, I have to admit. There's really no one solid horror element that will hit you perfectly and keep you sold the whole way. If one thing works for you, it might be the only time that horror is used, with really only the existential what if of what if alternate universes are real but they've met the inevitable endpoint faster than we did being prevalent throughout. Though I find that to be one of the more subtle elements, kind of to its detriment. But I don't think the series can be criticized too hard for that. Most of its flaws and why people might not enjoy it would just be from a lack of connecting to the analog horror formula, which I think is completely fair. It's not going to click with everyone. But for me, I think it's a really good example of how to use those basic tropes and style really well. Proof that just being another analog horror isn't a bad thing. It's whether you're another good analog horror or another bad one. And ARCADIA, I think, is a good one. A solid A tier.
I say those glorious words, I feel so refreshed.
Wormwood Institute is a series defined, I think, by the quality of its acting. It's hard to put to words, but this does feel at times like uncomfortably close to the kind of terrible news show that my own high school would put on when I was a little piece of shit. The corny acting that's genuine, but also you can tell bad, sells it very well. This is one of those great examples of putting more effort in to make it look low effort, because you can't tell the actors are doing it intentionally. They really sell most scenes, footage from corridors, scenes where they break character, the really uncomfortable scene of this ass clown verbally abusing his co-host. It's all super well done, and the series has a great sense of humor to it too. The series knows how to make a guy laugh, and that breaking of a viewer's tension means the sudden moments of horror really get to hit. And when I say sudden horror, I don't mean the screen goes red and the text is a different font and it says, "The blood of children will pour out as we swing dead babies around by their umbilical cords like lasso." I mean when the series reminds you that this school is fucked. While it masquerades as a school, there's lots of hints that it's much darker, and the casual/comedic way in which it does it only enhances the dark tone. It's, I'd say, a commentary on public schools and how they can be used to brainwash children into blind patriotism. And I think this is a great time to mention that I've talked a lot about horror naturally and how a lot of these series don't tend to scare me much, but I do think there's strangely more value to horror than how much it horrifies. Sometimes horror can be fun. In my opinion, most analog horrors either are genuinely scary or not scary at all. They don't usually slot into that fun, entertaining brand of horror. Horror that doesn't scare you, but does use those dark subject matters in an entertaining way that keeps your brain stimulated. Wormwood, I think, pulls this off. I'm never bored. The horror is fun, and then afterwards you think on it, and then the horror starts to sink in as you piece things together. Where I'd say the show does fall a bit is the way a lot of these news broadcasts end on the same exact text scroll. Yes, there is genuinely unsettling stuff here, and how it casually just tells children not to alert the police, and how clear it is that the missing students are actually just children who managed to run away from the fucking cult, but it loses a lot of impact when it plays every time. I can acknowledge the amount of times it shows up can enhance the horror by adding a time scale for the events, but I felt like the impact was lost for me. The series also feels unfinished, probably because it is. It ends on the blooper video, which is genuinely really uncomfortable because of how raw and genuine it feels. But then it just goes to a thanks for watching, this is on hold, and that's it. And with there being several years between when the show ended and now, with the group moving on to bigger projects, I don't see it continuing unless I will it into being with this video. Which means some of the lore details and mysteries remain unsolved and unfinished in a very unintentional feeling way. It feels like the employers of the principal and the group that occasionally hijacks the broadcast to try and expose Wormwood are supposed to be more elaborated on, and given at least a few details for us to chew on. Yes, there are enough pieces to theory craft as to what it is, but I get this vibe of puzzle pieces left out of the box. Like a game released unfinished that only gets half the DLC that was intended. It makes what could have been an S-tier series that knows what it is and handled it fantastically falter a bit. I'd still give it an A tier. I think it's fantastic at points, but those issues that could definitely be solved for more episodes do hold it back. It was too late that it dawned on me that Sidney Barber Tapes may have the analog horror setup and be called Tapes, but it doesn't really follow any analog horror anythings. That said, I included No Through Road last time, so screw it, we're digging in, baby! Sidney Barber Tapes is a simple found footage style horror short film about an urban explorer named Sidney Barber, whose camcorder was found 15 years after her disappearance. We basically just see her walk around for a bit. It's very tense. A big benefit this has over something like Oldest View, in my opinion, is its length. While I love Oldest View and its liminal space horror vibe, I cannot deny that more often than not, my patience isn't there to watch a 20-minute series of nothing leading up to the part where stuff happens. The rewatch value I don't think is there for oldest viewers much. This tape still has good build-up and a tense atmosphere, while not being a lengthy sit-down where there's little eye-catching. Empty buildings that are mostly silent and constantly have you second-guessing whether a shadow you see is a person or not genuinely terrify most people, and I can't try to Giga Chad bluff my way out of admitting that I don't like them either. Making the main villain a literal shadow as well was a great idea to emphasize that element, and I enjoy the protagonist not screaming at every little thing as I'm used to with this style of, look, I went into a place and saw a ghost video. The few moments we see the asset are genuinely golden. I did get endeared to Sidney. That said, I have a few issues. There are a few times where Sidney reacts, but we don't actually, get much visual on it, which I wouldn't mind as much, but for some reason I was just feeling, wait, was there something there? And then, I would go back and look again and I didn't see anything and I'd be confused. I also think the random audio recording that gives a backstory to the creature is super abrupt and kind of out of place. It feels like there could have been a more seamless way to work it in, even if it was just Sidney herself turning on the projector or something. I get it's spooky, but when she makes no reaction to it beyond snapping the camera, I don't really feel it. I don't know. In general, the whole bit feels unnecessary because the voice acting isn't very good, it sounds really fake and hokey, especially with the writing, and most of the lore here can be summarized with just the laboratory sheet found at the end. It doesn't sound professional, the tone is off, I didn't feel it needed to be here. Also, I think the static is a bit weird. There's times where I just don't know what it was there for. I'm sure in universe, the tape was old and damaged, but in that case the overall video quality looks remarkably clean. I still say it's a good piece of work though. I'd give it an A tier on genuine scare factor alone. With some ironing out in the future, I'm sure these creators could make something even better.
At this time it is advised not to lock all your doors and windows. Do not open the door for
Cheese Burrito's unhelpfully and unimaginatively named found footage series I could accuse of being as lacking in imagination as its name, but I think focusing on what it does derivatively would be a disservice to what it brings to the table. Yes, it's very similar to other series. It's hard to deny that it can often feel like Kane Pixel's Backrooms mixed in with a touch of Mandela Catalog. But it puts on a unique spin in places that I believe gives it value in its own right. For instance, a central protagonist. Two even, Tyler and Mikey. And while I praised Sidney Barber Tapes just now for being brisk, this series fills its long runtime before things happen with character building. Tyler feels like a real person, and that makes it much more interesting to watch his journey. And I also think when he falls through the hole in reality and no-clips into the back rooms, the fact that he still hears his friend calling for him is really cool. I also really like the idea of the creatures no-clipping back into our world as well. It's an awesome way to blend the Mandela Catalog concepts in. These weird imitation people are similar to the backrooms themselves. They are fusions of pieces and bits from humanity without any understanding of how and why things are the way they are. The tree monster as well is a great concept. A backroom creature attempting to be a tree but not really knowing what a tree is. The home invasion episodes are also genuinely really scary. They're just good. They also provide that first-person view of something like what happens in Mandela, but in a way that Mandela rarely if ever does. I'm also surprised how rare it is to see found footage of a human catching the usual EAS broadcast as it happens. We always see, this is a recovered tape recording of an EAS, but never, here's a tape of someone actually getting an emergency broadcast in real time. That innate horror of what if this bled on TV while I was alone at night becomes way stronger when you see it happen to a character. They experience that horror, and you experience it with them because they're a character you want to see succeed. These additions to the formula make a series that could be seen as derivative and uninspired quite compelling. I would give it a B tier for its ho-hum story and how I didn't find the backroom episode that scary, but the fact that it has characters and I wanted to see them succeed edges it into a low A tier. It's still an A tier. Guys, I fucked up. I watched the collection of episodes that was uploaded in order, and I think that was a mistake. Maria Labo Tapes, I personally think loses a lot of its impact when things are known from the start. The more you are aware of what's going on, the less effective parts are. Seeing the EAS episode after you already know what it's about takes away from the mystique. It definitely feels like you should watch after you... It just... Still, I'll try to be fair with this series. I think... I'll just try to be fair. It has a very classic analog horror style to it, with some parts that almost feel like they're crossed with the more unique style of Monument Mythos. It's a very nice middle ground. I think visually it's really cool. And I think the story is neat. It's an adaptation of an urban legend, which I'm all for seeing, and about a Filipino creature of folklore, which is very uncommon. I'm happy to see it. It does a decent job of hitting you with the tragedy of the main antagonist and the feeling of, yes, she's a monster, but you kinda do feel for how terrible it makes her feel that she's done this. But I think a story that's this relatively simplistic needs those scares, and I didn't feel that often. The analog horror usage did feel well done, so I'm not sure why exactly it didn't hit me. I want to say it's the order I watched it, but I don't know, the cannibalism dead child thing, while not done in a terribly be disturbed way, just felt kinda there. And I don't want to sound too dismissive, because I think on a technical level it's really cool and well done. It's really neat, it does a lot right, and as an adaptation of an urban legend, it could have been much worse. And like, I think the biggest thing for this with me is that it makes me kind of want to see more of this. I mean, how would the Humans Can Lick 2 urban legend work as a full-length analog horror? Maybe it wouldn't actually, but you know, I want to give this a B tier, but it's probably better than I'm giving it credit for. Woodlands National Park was not just good because it helped me cope with the cancellation of White Stag, but because it genuinely has some great stuff going on. It kind of does a Vita Canis adjacent thing and having its early episodes just set up monsters, but even in that, it feels like the most important thing is the questions it sets up. Why is there just a park with anomalies in it? Do these guys know what's going on? And as the episodes go past, how do they get away with covering them up, and why would a park be here? All culminating in the end of season 1 that shows a lot of promise. The plot gets thicker, our protagonists Minecraft Steve and Alex have not just good chemistry and plenty of charm, but a bit of depth to them as people. The monsters are not exactly prominent, and one is the fuck-ass bastardization of Wendigos that I hate, but the, as far as I'm aware, original creatures called walkers are pretty fucking cool, and the little we see of them despite their size only makes them feel more imposing. There are a few other good moments of horror. I mean, I hate this type of Wendigo, but it's a good scare. And the few moments of the cave dweller crazed people we see are also kind of chilling. I mean, I really like, I don't know what's the term, production values. I mean, the short film segment I really didn't need because, again, not what I'm looking for, but the series can often genuinely feel like old tapes of park rangers. They stutter and stammer, and they just sound like real people. It's awesome. I like how genuine it feels. Nice and genuine. It feels like stuttering, half-competent rangers working at a park. That's what does it for me. Yes, the lore is cool. Yes, the monsters are neat. Yes, it looks great. But the genuine feel of our two leads and how invested I am in them, that's what makes it. I don't know if I can say much more. I mean, season 2 is currently ongoing, but I think it has great potential. The first episode of season 2 sets up an alternate entire history to the world, which I'm not entirely sure on how I feel about, which is why I want to hold my tongue a bit. It could work out, but I also might not like it in the end. But, you know, we'll see. What I'm not really into, though, is how similar a lot of Season 1 episodes are. For every genuinely really good moment and really good scene, there's an episode that's like, the Rangers talk about something. Everything they said is repeated again on a wall of text. Then the Rangers run away because something off-screen is like maybe dangerous. Look out, guys, there's something over there. Oh. I'm still going to put in the B tier, though. I think it's quite solid, and I'm getting excited to see where it goes. Not a particularly high B tier, it's really back heavy, but, you know, it's not bad.
In 7 minutes.
Yeah, an hour and 7.
Okay. I had no idea that this went all the way to 2018, but Everyman Hybrid is the third of the big 3 Slenderverse works after Marble Hornets and the Child Predation one. I remember dropping this a good few years back before it finished because I wasn't enjoying myself. That or it was the other one I dropped. Not important, I did drop this show eventually. The main thing is that I didn't finish this show when it was running, and finishing it for the video reminded me both why I enjoyed it at first and why I dropped it. So Everyman Hybrid is an ARG, and debatably shouldn't even be in this video. Like, unlike Marble Hornets, this does not posit its entire first season as recovered tapes from a camera. It's more digital horror. But I wanted to talk about it. I think I saw a couple people bring it up, and let's talk about Everyman Hybrid. The biggest strength this has over almost any other series on this or the last list is character. The protagonists in Vinny, Jeff, and Evan are all very likable and feel very real. The whole concept of it beginning with them just doing a fitness channel with a 4th person playing the role of Slenderman in the background as a fun Easter egg, only for them to start finding him in places that he shouldn't have been, or on videos that his actor wasn't present for, is great. It's an excellent concept that I think really works well for the series. And full credit, Slenderman is pretty cool whenever he gets to actually show up. Yeah, when he gets to show up, because while he has the same amount of screen time as the Marble Hornets operator, he's not the star of the show. Now, I don't mind the rake showing up. I think it's really cool to see this absolute hood classic of a creepypasta monster represented, and honestly super well. Candle Cove was weird, but whatever. No, my issues with the series come in habits. Now, I do like Habit, at least now that I finished the show, but for a long time, I did not care about this guy. He was to me a wannabe Joker who didn't have that charisma and wasn't that interesting. I think for a while he took away from what I came there to see, which was how the characters dealt with Slenderman. Now that I've actually finished the show, I think Habit came out better than I remember, mostly due to the hints of deeper character and his plan to get himself killed, which actually kind of seems to work. But he still took time away from Slender Man, and that's what gets me. Slender Man isn't really a big deal in the Slenderverse when you think about it. The Operator is his own distinct character, the Administrator can fuck off, nobody likes him, and in both Everyman Hybrid and ML Anderson's, he gets replaced with Habit after a point. In Angel's game, he doesn't even show up, which leaves Dark Harvest Tall Man, which is a great adaptation of the original concept of a more physically brutal Slender Man, but not really much of the more traditional one. This isn't entirely Everyman Hybrid's fault. I think Habit is cool now that I finished the show. However, there are more issues that can't take me out of it. Like, the show itself I found to be really confusing and incoherent. Like, way more so than Marble Hornets. What I think the story is about is the main crew, Slenderman and Habit, are the current incarnations of a never-ending cycle that follows something called the Everyman Play, where the main three take the respective roles of Guardian, Voyeur, and Firebrand, and this has been going on for hundreds if not thousands of years. We're just watching the current cycle, which upon its end, leads to another iteration beginning again. And that's an interesting concept, but I never found myself terribly invested, and I felt like it was just kind of a thing that was happening. The main story was not very captivating to me, and personally, I don't find Everyman Hybrid all that scary. Compared to the primal fear that I got from the Operator, Slender Man here was just kind of fucking around while Habit did all the shit, and Habit does not scare me. He was just cracking jokes, making funnies, being a little shit, and because all these characters are locked in their own little bubble of iterations, I didn't feel like it ever would, it's not something that affects me. Why would I care? But I will give credit where it's due. The acting by the end is extremely good. There's a lot of very good subtleties, and you can feel these actors getting into their characters of 8 full years so easily. It's some great stuff, and they came up with some really interesting ideas as time went on. For instance, it's revealed at one point that one of the characters was purposely egging everyone on to make videos to fill his role as Voyeur, which is why these videos even exist. They kept recording and filming this stuff because they were being egged on by someone we didn't know was a villain until the end, for the purpose of getting everyone killed. They also explained the existence of a cameraman when in scenes where they shouldn't be. There are these strange creatures that are just called cameramen that Habit uses to film for him. It's a bit clunky, and it's really silly to imagine a zombie thing recording these events as they happen. It doesn't always feel like it plays into the strength of found footage when it's not the perspective of an actual character, but it's pretty creative, and I thought that was neat. And I think that's where the strength of Everyman Hybrid lies. It has years of storytelling that have lots of creativity and evolution in acting and effects. I was never super invested during this rewatch. The direction the show took was not one I cared for, but it's not bad. But where do I rank this? For me, it's like a B or an A, but I can't deny the impact of this show and how important it is to the Slender mythos cannot be ignored. I will begrudgingly give it the S tier that I do think it deserves, even if it never clicked with me. Valle Verde, which is probably pronounced wrong or Green Valley, is the first of the lost PS1 analog horror ARG types I've looked at, and right off the bat it understood the assignment more than maybe any other series on this list. I mean, this just looks like a PlayStation game. It has some of the most breathtakingly accurate and gorgeous visuals in the scene. I don't want to immediately jump into it because it's so obvious, but it's the most striking thing. Later episodes make up entire fake games that look so real and believable. People genuinely thought these were real before the bleeding of games things happen, and I was one of them. And another thing beyond the visuals and the camera work is the subtle things, like the sound effects. The menus all match up what they're trying to be. Oh my god, it's so good looking and sounds good. The show also managed to blur the line between haunted game where devils are manipulated and game that was intentionally made with ulterior motives in a very captivating way. The story of the series is a guy finds a tape and digitizes the contents for us to see, revealing a set of anomalies during playtesting of Green Valley that shows some odd happenings. Children stuck in the game world due to some sort of ceremony, a cult sacrificing things to their false god, an AI that forced itself to unlearn all but one language so it couldn't understand the screams of children, which is so dark but also really cool in a twisted way. That said, the show is very blunt early on, and it jumps so quickly into the scares that I can't say I was really engrossed in the game world for a bit. It immediately hits you with the creepy gameplay, and the first episode can just be summed up as 7 deadly sins imagery followed by the Garden of Eden story, and then Jesus saves the devoted. But I do think as the series goes on, its story of games bleeding into each other and the growing revelations about this false god become more interesting. And then comes the third episode with some of the most insane scenes in it. The sacrifice scene genuinely shocked me. I did not see that coming. Green Valley, I think, has all the makings of a fantastic S-tier series. What I think I needed more of, though, is that story. Specifically, I don't feel like the show has reached its conclusion or given enough of itself away for me to give it that S-tier. It's an honorary S-tier, but I think I need to see more of the vision overall to be certain of how I feel and give it that spot. I'd happily still give it an A-tier, though. Well worth the hour I spent. Genuinely really good.
Well, I guess it reminds me of...
I feel like I'm at the second coming of Hey Kids Studio here. Not for anything they have in common. I mean, one is an adaptation of an iconic internet story, and the other is entirely unique as far as I can tell. But I am still watching another surprisingly high production value series with really good puppetry work that looks exactly like a middle to low budget children's show in the best way, which sadly only has so many episodes as of now. Now these episodes I think are really good. I can't say I find these particularly scary, and it is one of those series that heavily relies on the ARG elements to tell its compelling story, but it has a lot of charm and character. For example, I find the iteration of the story of Little Red Riding Hood present in the third episode deathly amusing, which makes the dark turn a lot more effective than it could have been otherwise, and the potentially superfluous second episode is very entertaining and enjoyable. It has the same charm to me as Angel Hair's Q&A episodes. I really do enjoy it. This is back to front an incredibly entertaining short series, but that's where I have to say it's inevitably held back a bit. This show is far from finished. It only has a few episodes, and as of now, the story doesn't go beyond there's this fan re-uploading clips of this mostly lost children's show that seems to have supernatural powers linked to missing children and large-scale environmental damage. That's it. I am very curious to see how it grows and develops from here, and I'm hopeful the horror will improve, because as it is, the interruption in episode 1 is a bit creepy, but otherwise feels a bit too obviously added in after the fact. Like, yes, this is abrupt enough, but it just looks to me like something which was edited in after and not an actual broadcast interruption. And episode 3 of course has this too, but it's actively framed as if there's some fucky editing, so it's not as egregious. But at the end of the day, I am invested in what's happening here. I want to know what's happening and see more of these characters. And Lucy thinking her shirt has an L instead of a 7 because she looks down and sees an L is fucking gold. I am all for it. I am giving this a very high B tier, but with more episodes likely to come down the road, an A tier at least is very much on the cards, and I'm excited to see more. How exactly am I supposed to comment on Tryred Witness Archive? There's 5 episodes as of writing this, and between them I like one, kind of. It's hard to really express what I don't like about the show without just pointing at the second episode, doing the Meg Family Guy arm slitting bit, and trying to make that a scare. Now, that failed scare was really funny, but unfortunately most don't end up being that amusing. There were 2 moments outside of episode 4 that actually got me. This live action bit in episode 1, and this doorway in episode 3. Other than that, there were a lot of jump scares, general analog horror scares that didn't affect me, and just stuff happening. I wasn't really impressed with Tryred. I think most of it was really generic and basic analog horror stuff, about like a group trying to investigate the mass disappearances in Tryred, Texas, and when the story stuff is there, I sometimes got into it, but not super often. That was aside from episode 4. Episode 4 I actually really liked, mostly. You see, I loved a lot of the segments here. They creeped me out, or in the case of the Dreamcast segment, really enthralled me because I was getting into the characters. But it's over a fucking hour long. Some might ask, well, why is putting all the segments together in one video any different to if they were their own episodes? But the answer is just that I don't want to pause in the middle of an episode. There's not as clear a delineation between segments, and if I'm watching a show and these segments are all just different episodes, I could put the fucking thing down after an episode if I have to do something else without having to remember a fucking timestamp. I just got way too tired of this episode by the end. Season 2 right now has 1 episode, and it does, I think, improve on a lot of my problems. I genuinely was a bit creeped out by the screaming in the background of the found footage where the characters didn't care about it. Like, people disappear so much in this place that the average layman doesn't care anymore, as long as it's not one of them. Except then it has a jump scare with a big loud noise, because of course it does. Tryred, I think, is improving. Episode 5 really was an upgrade over most of Season 1, and I am hoping the next episodes will continue to have better presentation and scares, because I want to like this show, but there's just these things, these small things here and there that really don't do it for me. I have to give it a C tier. I'm sorry. Malbolge Trench feels like it takes the opening episode of ARCADIA and makes that vague idea the whole subject, and I don't dislike that at all. I personally am more fascinated and enamored by the deep ocean and its life than scared of it, seeing as logistically nothing down there can really get super humongous, and I find a lot of the weird creatures more gorgeous than I do ugly. But this series knows not to make that the sole form of horror, because these fucking tiki mask creatures are awesome and genuinely freaky. Seemingly just bits of ornamentation that seem to consume people and warp their bodies into the same shape as the tikis themselves. That people's eyes line up with the tiki's own and people don't notice much wrong is horrifying. The idea that these people are stuck and aware, begging for help from people who don't even realize what they're witnessing. I love these as villains, and they are the kind of villain that only works in an analog horror. See, in a horror movie or a short film, these creatures would either have to move a lot more than they do, or we'd need a cast of idiots who never realize what's going on. But the wider timescale possible through analog horror storytelling means we can see them at play taking out lots of people over a really long span of time. We don't need dumb people who get themselves killed, and we don't need these things moving around a lot and kind of ruining the horror. They can just stand there, and once every few years one person will become a victim, but due to the timescale analog horror uses, we can see a lot more. The deep sea stuff is still good, but it's these things that mostly stuck with me. With that said, I didn't find the story very engaging. While these are scary, which I do give credit for absolutely, I wasn't always super connected to or invested in what I was watching. A few great moments of horror within a few episodes of overall decency. I put it on the lower end of A tier. A pretty good one, I definitely say to check it out, especially if deep sea stuff freaks you. One of the oldest pieces of all that I was fully ready to throw into F tier. And in fact, I was ready even after my latest rewatch, because of course I've seen Agamemnon Counterpart before. It's about 2 minutes long, so if you're young or somehow never saw this, you can just go watch it yourself. Now on a critical analysis level, this is maybe the worst thing ever made. It has some pretty well done effects, especially for the time. This is from like 2001, but narratively, it opens up with the unbelievably and devastatingly worthless claim that a tape was recovered from a certain blue planet in the future. And what you're about to watch is a completely different one. And in terms of both content and horror, it's nothing! Some animation, some really bad sounding screams, and oh, that's it. There's a part that feels like it could even give people seizures, so I'm just not going to show that. Oh yeah, seizure warning maybe to anyone who goes to watch it. But the more you think about Agamemnon Counterpart, the more fascinatingly surreal it is. I got a bit of flack last time for glazing unorthodox kitten as art, so I'm just going to take the risk and say that Agamemnon Counterpart is also art. But less in the, wow, this is thought-provoking stuff that speaks to me sort of way, and more in the, there's nothing here, but what if we tried to put the puzzle together anyway? Like, to a degree, this is somewhat brilliant in hindsight. This is a prophetic representation of what AI-generated content often feels like. Completely nonsense stuff that vaguely represents what it's supposed to. Or it could be an interpretation of alien life attempting to recreate human concepts. It's the counterpart to the tape that was stated as being found in the prologue. It's aliens trying to recreate what was on that tape without understanding the why behind the what. In any regard, the only way this video feels like it has any value is when interpreted as something inhuman attempting to replicate human concepts without getting them, oddly linking this internet hood classic to the backrooms. The other way this works is as a comedy video. I mean, the opening being this story has nothing to do with anything is the kind of nonsensical humor I enjoy. But how much clout can I put behind a 2-minute video for being a little bit weird? It's really not that good or interesting, but it elicits a response. I can only say I'd rank this in the D tier, probably because, yeah, it's an F tier video with enough nonsense going on to make me go, yeah, I won't forget it at least. The Mannequin Tapes, huh? I guess I'm pretty interested. Let's see what it is. Oh, it's the Clockwork Visitant creators, isn't it? And it's good. It's good, what can I say? The basic concept itself is interesting. It's the fear behind the zombie concept personified in such an interesting way. These untouchable hordes of humanoid things that turn anyone who comes into contact with them into more of them. Instead of the excessive gore that zombies carry, these are just unsettling. They're in huge numbers, they never move on camera, which is oddly scarier. They perfectly ride that line between telling and showing enough for you to know why they're a danger, but never so much that your brain starts to figure out ways to deal with them and thus stops being afraid. You only ever see 2 characters getting turned, but god does it look good. The first one's a little bit amusing because it looks clean as hell, and the second one is in the short film that breaks away from the analog horror style, and it looks fucking sick. The series as a whole is not even a solid 15 minutes straight, but it does a great job using its time. It sets up the threat, it introduces you to the characters, and it ends with their escape. There's some genuinely great scares, and I was very quickly endeared to these dorks. Not just because we're all Aussies here, but because they kind of have a similar rapport to what I have with a lot of my friends in real life. Yeah, we'd go to a playground and act like fucking morons. Yeah, we'd see something weird and go, let's maybe go. And yeah, we'd get picked up by an attack helicopter surveying Queensland during an outbreak of deadly mannequins. The only issue I have is, there's just not enough of it. The story is finished, but I honestly felt like I needed more. It doesn't feel finished. This is a concept that I think warranted more content. It doesn't have a single condensed local story like Chimpy Chippa, and it isn't built on mystery and engrossing you in an entity like Clockwork Visitant. It's a coherent story where I just want to see more people trying to survive these mannequins. Maybe that runs the risk of showing too much and making them lose the fear factor, or maybe they just didn't want to be too repetitive and lose the luster of the creatures. But I have faith they'd cook if another short film or set of episodes dropped. I'd still say A tier. It's a wonderful short horror experience. The Boiled One phenomenon, one of the biggest individual analog horror videos ever, and yet it's still a miracle the original video showed up when I searched for it, because I've searched it a few times and quite often random other shit will come up instead. I think the slow cooked one has every reason to have the clout it does. It's a great concept, a cognito-hazard analog horror creature that doesn't kill you, but paralyzes you for a long time and permanently cripples you, breaking his way into your mind and ruining you forever. And the video is really good at that slow build-up as he shows up throughout. Text changes at points. Things are different, but in a subtle way that makes you start to question your own sanity. Did it always say that? I don't know. It's all really well done, and there's this interesting, presentation where they really emphasize the cognito-hazardous danger of the steamed one by having text and instructions and shit, even reversed audio and such to try and counteract its effects. It is really strange to me though how they're still willing to show him physically. I get the blue tinted glasses are something I'm supposed to be wearing, but you can't just change the screen's color, alter the hue of the broadcast. Is it just because the purple guy or the blue bald one just aren't as scary and wouldn't have become as big, which would fail Doc Nowhere's goal of destroying the online legacy of actual monster Mutsuhiro Watanabe? Yes, probably. But I do have some broken immersion when I'm like, this thing can actually kill you by being looked at, and you just slap the motherfucker whole hog on screen. That did take me out a bit, but I guess it's possible that the intention is that as the sous vide one is currently messing with the very audio you're watching, it's also preventing its form from being obscured here. That, I guess, works. I think it's a good video. Damn good. It absolutely warrants its popularity. I'll slap it in A tier. It's good. Obelisk was a series that didn't really capture me. I like this starfish thing, and in fact I really like the first episode. There's a genuine creep factor to seeing a child see an analog horror monster in their room and play with them. The vaguely humanoid appearance makes it all the worse for reasons that I think are obvious when you see an obviously creepy figure in a child's room and playing with them watching TV. But I think as the series goes on, it just generally loses me. Episode 2 is it's fine. The first episode didn't creep me out, I think because the house with no doors looked really fake to me. And while I didn't mind episodes 3 and 5, I just wasn't captured. The early 2000s point-and-click computer game aesthetic I feel was nice to see and aided in this dreamlike feel. And though fully expected, I did like the monster being more fluid in its motion than the rest of the world in episode 3. But something about Obelisk just didn't catch onto or grab my attention. It didn't scare me. I understand what the show is going for, that liminal dreamlike horror. This thing is a metaphor for something, it's more than meets the eye. I wouldn't say don't watch this, it's just, it didn't do anything for me. Not yet, that is. The show is ongoing, so it could come around, especially if it keeps that point-and-click aesthetic, because I do really enjoy that. But I'm gonna say C tier, it didn't hit me.
Hey. Hey!
At Red Lobster.
Great Choice does count, does it? Shut up, yes it does. This is a tape. In fact, I think it uses the analog horror format in a really unique way. It plays into how, as tapes, these videos can be rewound and played from the start. But what if one of those characters became aware of this? Now, I think this concept isn't taken to its full potential here, and kind of like with Mikaeli, I kind of want to see a full series actually focusing on just this concept and not expanding too far beyond. But it is still used super well here, and I love how the actual effect of the VHS slowly dies off the more the woman fights against the script she's forced into. Now, is this video scary? Not really, outside of one part, which like, yeah, this shit with everything turning grey and stuff, that got me. But it's definitely funny and entertaining. I really enjoyed this, and it's also an allegory for drug use. You know, this guy offering his cushy deal, but as time goes on, the person taking it comes to fight back, but gets pushed on harder. Finally, she breaks free from her addiction and goes to a help group, but the influence is still there, constantly banging on the doors. That said, having it be so blatantly said at the end feels like it lacks subtlety, but it does recontextualize what happened earlier on, so maybe that's the point? That constructing feeling of inescapable terror, and I think it goes without saying, but very Too Many Cooks energy. Could I have included Too Many Cooks? Ah, whatever. This was a certified banger. I really liked how it was done. And I know this video is for analog horror, but there is something to be said for how analog horror is more so the most popular and well-known style in the wider analog storytelling format. Kind of like how found footage isn't just horror, but it is mostly known for horror. I can appreciate an analog experience that isn't just for the horror. This is an A tier for me, a high one at that. It's well worth a watch, but unlike the S tier one-shot experiences, I don't think it stuck with me as much. ECKVA. ECKVA's a lot, I think. I was pretty excited to watch this, seeing as I am a huge Marble Hornet slut. Was it worth the hype? It's hard to say. ECKVA is a blend between digital early internet scenes, the worst animated show ever, and some really good live action stuff. Like, holy shit, the static fuckboy man is really damn cool and looks amazing. Horror-wise, there's this odd mix of things trying to be scary that don't work for me, but then some things that fucking get me. The blood is a pretty freaky motherfucker, but narratively, I was confused. I get to some extent that's on me for not actually doing the whole ARG thing, but for me, Marble Hornets managed to have a super engaging ARG story while still being its own relatively coherent narrative that can be watched on its own. ECKVA I believe to be a story about a guy or girl, or either or neither, looking into these strange transmissions, eventually getting attacked, part of them starts to turn to static, which is a really cool concept genuinely, and then stuff happens. There's a text-based game with that one TTS voice from Faith, you know, the one that says, Mortis, and then it just kind of ends. I don't know if it's finished, I don't know if there's more I'm missing, but what I do know is I'm certainly missing something. I do think this shows how Marble Hornets wasn't just a fluke though. There's so much skill and talent and ability shown in this. I can see such interesting ideas. I see how well they can use the standard analog horror format, and it's really good. There's plenty of creativity, there's good variety, it's a good series. I really don't want me picking small holes in it to take away from that fact, but the really scattershot, not even remotely sort of approach this segment has, I think is a testament to how all over the place I feel. I think at this point, where I rank it depends on asking the question, do I like it more than I dislike it? And the answer is yes, and with how good some of these visuals are, I'm confident in putting it in the C tier. It's visually good enough for that, but there's just a lot that didn't work for me. Dog Nightmares is one that I've seen a lot of hype for, and not to sound rude, but I didn't entirely get it. I've seen the series have a reputation for being really scary, but I really didn't get that. I did get unnerved. There are some really unnerving moments, but I wasn't scared often. This shot deserves the reputation it has though. This is incredible, and I think the series is significantly creepier if you take the dog head as allegorical and not literal. Now when I say I didn't really get the hype, I don't mean I didn't understand where it came from. Visually the series is fantastic, some really nice work here. The crinkling paper in particular is such a distinctive way of conveying the story, I love it. The way in which the dog head guy moves is so obviously an edit, but it comes across as intentionally jarring. Like it's not real, it's covering up something or someone. It's incredibly uncomfortable thinking of this as an older man using the child's lost dog in some way to get close to them. But whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. I might be supplying context that doesn't exist there. That said, it would be a complete lie to look at this motherfucker and go, yeah, this isn't even remotely unnerving at all, this is normal. What I think the show does really well, beyond the visuals, the nice slow burn, the editing, the cinematography, is making me want more. I want to know where this story is going, and part of that is I just want to see this creator make more, I want to see this continue. Dog Nightmares is a very good series, I think another A tier. It's definitely good. I just don't think it's quite the S tier that a lot of people seem to have hyped it up as. It has the makings for it though.
And the theme. And with both our minds combined, this was the final result.
This was recommended to me kind of late into things. I'd already watched over 30 shows and had many more on the block, but I was curious by the name and I went to have a look. This has to be one of the most criminally underwatched series on this list. This is already a video with more underappreciated series than the first one in my opinion, but like some episodes of this only have a couple hundred views. On one hand, it is very much an ARG that is incomplete currently. There are elements that don't fit in super snug as of yet. I'm not really sure about half of what I've seen. What I am sure about is that I love the usage of the analog medium here. The implication that the reality we're watching doesn't actually extend beyond what's seen on the TV. It's made throughout, or at least something of that sort. Characters can't seem to see things beyond the box. Our host is even surprised when one of them does. He seems to in some way be holding this reality we're seeing together, as if this is a fictional character creating their own existence and playing God. This is all interesting stuff, and even if I'm proven wrong entirely by future revelations, I am very engaged and intrigued. Beyond that, there's a few phone call episodes and an EAS and some other television stuff, so there's certainly some variety to break up what could be monotonous interview episodes. And because there's that nice variety, it makes these real treats when they come around. Now, is this series scary? It has its moments, and it does raise unsettling ideas in my head. Like, we're all familiar with the Truman Show and the Matrix concepts of reality isn't real, but what if reality only existed as far as our senses perceived? Arguably on a philosophical level that's just true, but what if physically that's true as well? And what would happen if someone else who only existed because you perceived them suddenly became aware? What if everything behind you isn't real until you turn around to look at it, but the thing behind you realized that fact? Is your reality surrounded by a void? Basically, it made me think of the Boltzmann brain more than usual. And I also want to note, the bit about it being more of an ARG, very much not a negative in this case, because it's still ongoing, and that gives it a very unique situation, where it's kind of time-locked in this video, where there's this ongoing thing that's not a series, so it's not just a series, it's not just going to be outdated, but I literally cannot talk about the whole thing. This is a thing that you have a chance to go and engage in an ARG right now, assuming it doesn't get cancelled or finished by the time I get this video out. With all my praise, I think this is going to be in the A tier, another one. Man, this is such a positive video, isn't it? I'm quite glad I haven't stumbled into any bad ones yet. Aavarion at least deserves a Night Mind or an Insider Mind ARG breakdown. Wait, what do you mean Insider Mind hasn't uploaded in 2 years? Boave is a series that's hard to really describe in sentences, but easy to describe in individual words. Striking, stylistic, thoughtful, artistic, that last one especially. Bois Vert is not just an analog horror or a web show, but to get pretentious again, and fully aware of it this time, it's a work of art that translates the chaos of the human mind better than anything I've personally seen before. We're so used to, like as a concept, depictions of the mind that are either a surreal but ultimately comprehensible landscape where concepts are given names and appearances in creative ways, or as simply a single thought at a time within a large space that represents us as individuals overall. Now that's definitely better for a coherent story, but in reality the mind is a chaotic place where emotions ebb and flow, they come into conflict with one another as our brains try to figure out the right one for us to be feeling at any given point. It's genuinely such a beautiful show to watch, and more so to experience. It's the kind of art that I think can appeal to anyone. It's at the baseline visually gorgeous, but also equal parts surreal, terrifying, unnerving, and thought-provoking. You don't just watch this and flick down to your phone to check in if your friend has given you an update on if they'll be there for lunch. It captures you, it keeps you, kind of like the Dark Thoughts represents. But the more you try to pay attention and understand it, the more it opens up into endless interpretations. Is it about mental health, isolation, depression, the lingering effects of quarantine, religious faith, conflicts therein, trauma, thoughts of self-harm, maybe all of the above, maybe none of the above? I think it's clear that the series began as representation of the quarantine that happened half a fucking decade ago. What do you mean half a fucking decade ago? But it's evolved into pure art. A reflection of mental health that is truly unparalleled in my experience. Like, would I ever say that my experience with depression and thoughts of self-harm and ending it all is equivalent to various aspects of my mentality engaging in verbose debate, fighting with giant hands and trying to kill a pineapple-headed furry half-naked man with a kitchen knife? No, but if you showed it to me and asked if it represented those things, I'd probably say yes. And like, I think it's clear from my videos so far that the things I value most in analog horror is story and horror, with the best in both being among my favorites. If it makes me afraid to sleep with my door unlocked or makes my heart cry for the characters, it's going to work for me. But Boave doesn't do either, really. Its story is up for interpretation, and its horror is definitely unnerving, but it doesn't scare me. But it's one of those exceptions that fails at what I'm looking for, and instead finds something I didn't know I was looking for and pulls it off. It makes me laugh, it makes me shiver, it catches my attention, it never lets me stop being enthralled in the experience. I can't stress how funny it is for the two most artistic and interpretive series I've covered be on such opposite spectrums of scale, where like one of them is the larger series where everything exists from a point of view where the things that make up the atoms of that world are whole universes, and the other one is the smaller scale series of, oh, it's all in the head of some guy named Oriel. Boave is an experience at the end of the day. I think anyone who hasn't seen it should give it a look-see. It's an easy S tier for me, but I think it's so up for interpretation that I think any tier kind of fits for it depending on what you get from it. The Fenston, Missouri collection is a mixed bag, I think. When it comes to like a pure horror experience, this one it's special. I think it dodges a lot of the issues I've had with some of the others. It's not just jump scares and now it's spooky time bits, but it does have sudden scares that are done well. It's not just PNG appears, it's animated. The entities are just uncanny enough to make me go, yeah, fuck that guy. Not literally though, I'll leave that to Scott. I do like this kind of horror though, because it's really good at recreating the kind of ghost videos that you used to see all over YouTube. Like, it's impossible to avoid thinking that if you've been on YouTube long enough to remember the inundation of ghost videos out there. Now, some of these don't quite have that energy, but plenty do, and that helps not just make it scary, but also weirdly nostalgic. These ghosts are really well done, and I find the horror pretty good. Story-wise, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's really strange, because it feels like these are all their own thing that then retroactively got changed to become related. So while I was totally okay with just like these out-of-context horror collection videos, the video bringing them together is like, I guess they're all related to something that has stars for eyes? Or maybe they're just stars and unrelated? I don't know. Like, if this wasn't here, I'd say just like, shame there's no story, but it's hard to criticize the series for something it's not trying to have, when the horror stuff is this good. But instead, it does have a story, and the story is just wishy-washy and goes over my head in a whatever shrugged my arms kind of way. That said, it's not a lost cause. I think all this really needs is one more video that like either makes things more clear or makes things intriguing enough that I don't mind being confused. I am interested to see where this goes, and I think it has huge appeal as just a creepy series, which makes its lower views really disappointing. Go check out everything from this video, fellas. B tier. Morley Grove is another case of digital horror and analog horror having that blurry line. But I think at their base, the two are the same kind of horror with a different aesthetic, and I do think there's more to either than just their aesthetics. Anyway, Morley Grove really evokes this old YouTube videos look, and funnily enough, I think due to the context of the monster in the series, it only improves with age due to how dated it is. You see, the series is about a thing that caused a bunch of kids to disappear, and now records and memories of them are becoming distorted. Images are broken, videos are affected, audio's garbled, memories are erased. The Morley Man as an analog horror antagonist is most defined, I think, not just by his Slenderman-ass vibe, but also his retroactive erasure of people he takes. And ignoring the horror of that specifically for the moment, the fact that his powers are retroactive and makes it so things were always fucked up, the old YouTube aesthetic really works to the show's favor. The thought that this isn't an edit we've seen on today's YouTube, this is archival footage from long ago that has somehow been distorted. That questioning of reality where you're not sure if it was always like that. You remember it being different, but this footage can't be tampered with. Look at the upload date. It must have just always been this way. It toys with the inherent creepiness of things like the Mandela effect, where the fallibility of human memory is exposed in you specifically, and makes your grasp on reality waver and shake for just a moment. And to stop ignoring the horror of the Morley man himself, it's genuinely so creepy how this works. Imagine if you had a loved one who was gone, but your memories barely exist about them. Any evidence they were there is erased, and anything that used to be in there either absent from or distorted. And any picture or video you take of the distorted image before or after will itself change. The distortion of documentation and proof that makes you unsettled. Maybe that random figure you barely remember in a dream that one time was a subconscious memory of a sibling or a guardian or a friend that you don't actually remember anymore. Maybe that ghost or that empty space you think you see in the 20-year-old family photo is the vestigial remains of the memory of someone you once knew. That deep-seated psychological terror is absolutely filling this series. And that's not even going into the terror of what's actually physically presented. We see things distort. We see people being warped until they're not even in photos anymore. There's so many great scares. This is one of the only series across either video so far to not just scare me in the moment, but actually stick with me. A series that makes me question my grasp of my memory to a crazy degree. There doesn't need to be a Morley man for me to forget people. I've definitely forgotten people I used to know and talk with, family members I've not seen in decades and might not ever see again. That second guessing of what my brain has evolved to want to consider fact is an undeniable terror for me specifically that shakes me to my core. This is, for me, true genuine horror. And for that, I can ignore the generally lackluster storyline, because the fear factor is so prevalent here. I can also overlook how few episodes there currently are. I was just going to give it an A tier, but as I've deconstructed its horror and why and how it shakes me and makes me so unnerved, I have to give it a rare S tier born purely from scare factor. And it's always hard to explain good horror as, like, compared to bad horror. Like, with good horror, it's always going to come down to how well it works for you. Bad horror, you can point out, yeah, you've got a picture of Peter Griffin death pose as your villain. But good horror is a matter of expressing why it unnerves you, and so people who already agree with you are going to be like, yeah, cool. But those who don't get the same horror, they're going to think you're crazy, and like, I totally get that. I understand. Not everyone's going to be scared by the same stuff. In the end of the day, though, this is my tier list, and it did scare me, so this is where it goes. This is going to sound weird, but alternate American folklore feels like production-wise, it should predate Monument Mythos. What I mean by that is that it feels like a step down from most of Manticore's work from a presentation sense, in my opinion. It's a very repetitive series. Text shows up, image shows up, text shows up, image shows up. The text explains the image and the image shows a thing. The same music and often similar theming? Is that theming bad? No, but it was super repetitive and honestly harder to watch than I expected from Manticore. She's normally a fantastic editor and producer of great visuals, and by the end it definitely steps up and improves in that regard. And this is what I mean. It feels like we're seeing Manticore build up to the skill level shown in the Monument Mythos and Nixonverse, even early bodies. However, on a narrative level, this is fan service heaven. The stars from the House in the Ocean cameo, the Lunarian Queen's speech from Nixonverse punctuates the trailer. One of the characters is literally revealed to be an entity from the original Monument Mythos. The teaser that the Crescent King may have survived being fictionalized is actually paid off. And frankly, Nixon is such a fucking idiot for making it impossible for anyone to remember the Crescent King, and then allowing him to continue to exist as a comic book, and thus allowing him to be remembered and return. What happened to the other version of Virginia Arnoldson we didn't get to follow? Her story gets told in arguably the most heart-wrenching moment of the entire Monument Mythos canon, and I am including Everett in that comparison. It's so fucking good at tying up bows for the various threads left by Monument Mythos, Nixonverse, House in the Ocean. Fuck Trinity Desk Project in modern day though, they haven't been re-uploaded yet like Season 3, as of recording this. And there are some things unique to alternate American folklore that I like. Paper York is really fucking interesting, and the Jester is a hilarious character, even with the context of who he is and how he came to be. For some reason, I look at him and I just imagine it's Claude from Star Wars. The series also has plenty of fucking funny black comedy throughout, which I can appreciate. It's genuinely really enjoyable at points, especially when it picks up in the later parts. Now, the thing is, I don't know how much of my enjoyment, however, comes specifically from the context I have from the Monument Mythos. How enjoyable is this without that context? Well, I don't know. And I do see a lot of people getting really upset when people without the context necessary for something very fanservice heavy give that fanservice heavy thing a review, and I definitely understand why people would be annoyed by that, but I think there is some inherent value in seeing how someone who doesn't have all that context may interpret something, may view something, because it does open up a new viewpoint on that work. And I am curious, has anyone watched alternate American folklore without any context from Monument Mythos, Nixonverse, House in the Ocean, any of that? Has that happened? Probably, but has anyone who's done that watching this now? And if you are, what was it like? Because I genuinely want to know. For me though, I wasn't super invested in the repetitive early stuff before things started getting wrapped up with other shows. For this reason, I'm going to have to give this show a B tier overall. On its own merits and disconnected from the shows it spins off from, I don't think it holds up. And I say that only because the early part that I didn't enjoy had nothing to do with the others. Is that coincidence or not? I don't know. I found it rather boring for a stretch, and I found it didn't make the most of its creators' incredible skills. And I don't think it's enthralling as, say, the Nixonverse when comparing it to other spin-offs from Monument Mythos. Man, I was excited for this. Paleo analog horror? Awesome! And yes, it was awesome. Holobirds has a great understanding of how to make dinosaurs scary, giving us some genuinely fantastic found footage sequences of just people trying to get away from one. That on its own would get a big thumbs up because it's some fantastic stuff. But I also appreciate the story that's being told and the reveals given. The series could have easily just been dinosaurs exist now, or Jurassic Park happened, or if the creator is to be believed, FNAF with dinosaurs. But actually, it's revealed that there is a genuinely horrifying scientific process behind what's happening. That, given what happened to the failures of this process, also kind of explains why the dinosaurs often stop moving when observed, freezing like statues. And a rare happy ending in analog horror, that's cool too. Now, despite watching this literally right before writing this segment and liking it a lot, I really don't know what else to say. How much of my enjoyment is derived from raw paleo passion? Probably a lot. But I'm certain that I really respect the practical effects used, I love the horror moments, and I like the story. And while I don't have much wrong with it, I do think there's maybe some potential it isn't hitting. It's hard to say what exactly, but I feel like this could have been even better with either a wider scope or a longer scope. However, the creator is actively trying to avoid the issue of series that go on so long that with every new episode you have to rewatch the whole thing again to recall the episodes you missed, because the episode came out like 2 years after the last one, which is a genuine issue that a lot of series can't avoid when they're ongoing, and actively parrying that is commendable. But I just don't know what else to say. I just kind of liked it. Solid A tier. It's good. Fuck off. I'm sorry. This was on my list last year, and I couldn't take it, and I still can't. The Wyoming Incident is iconic for two things. One is that so few people care about it that it wraps around from being obvious hoax to something people actually believed happened. The other is that it's one of the only ARGs I've ever seen that got dropped by its entire fanbase, not because the creator was a shithead, or because the story was too confusing, or the episodes are coming out too infrequently, but because it was completely and utterly boring and stupid. It goes from, hey, this weird broadcast in Wyoming was kind of creepy, and then into a serial killer plot, and then like a cult plot. There's no story here, it's just lore. And like, I love lore, don't get me wrong, I'm fucking obsessed with good lore. But good lore is a building block of storytelling, not storytelling in and of itself. Just like telling a story where nothing happens but characters develop while sitting in a room doing nothing, telling a story of just lore is not going to work unless you're really fucking good at it. But this isn't fucking All Tomorrows. Well, no, even that has a narrative and progression, but it's like, it's not fucking 17776, the lore dump of what footy will be like in the future when we're all immortal and can do nothing but play 1,000-year-long games of footy across miles. This is the most boring ARG ever made, and it's frustrating. If I only looked at, say, the opening video, then it's almost like so good just because there's so little. Like, yeah, I get how if this randomly popped up on your TV late at night one day while watching 4 AM Atlanta Square Panthers reruns, it would scare the living daylights out of you. But frankly, any minor static interruption can cause the same effect. This is a good opener because it teases promises and ideas. The issue is that all it teases is content we don't have and will never get. As an analog horror, it's one sort of okay video with a few other random uninteresting fuck nuggets strewn about, and as an ARG, it's nothing. I wish there was more to say, because I hunted down the bits and bobs of the show from what I could remember, but this never left much positive association with me. It's a funny series because it's funny to mock and talk about. A big, fat, honking, stinking wah-wah-wee F tier. Get out of my sight. Fairy Tale analog horror was both better and worse than what I expected. For one thing, conceptually it's great. A lot of fairy tales are just really creepy and meant to scare kids, so making them horror stories based on how different modern sensibilities are to when they were written makes sense. And unlike a big budget movie, it doesn't have to be stretched to feature length and become really boring like that one Red Riding Hood movie. It can be however long the tale warrants. And unlike an indie short film, analog horror can be conveyed in so many ways that if someone doesn't have the budget or the know-how to get around the budget, it doesn't necessarily hinder the project. You can do the big bad wolf or the 3 fuck-off bears without worrying too much about the budget if you know what you're doing. On the other hand though, conceptually it's rife with issues. It could go the route of being hysterically over the top in its want to go darker than the story warrants, and with how much corruption of innocence type shit there is in media these days, especially online, I was a bit concerned. As it turns out, we have a generally competent hour-long story of Red Riding Hood, the 3 Little Pigs, and Hansel and Gretel being connected and made into its own story. Okay, interesting. I think the door is still open for a more faithful adaptation of these stories in this format, but I think they had a good idea with this and it works for me. The art looks really nice for a lot of the series, capturing what it's imitating really well, and applying a level of traditional analog horror techniques and stylization that gives it its own flavour. Not the most unique flavour, but there's no crime in replicating an art style you're fond of in this way. I think the connective tissue is also pretty good. Connecting the 3 Little Pigs and Red Riding Hood is pretty easy, the wolf just needs to survive one of them to appear in the other. But making the huntsman a grown-up Hansel is pretty creative, even if his mutilation means the Hansel and Gretel episode isn't really that story in any way but name, and the concept of entering a witch's hut due to some breadcrumbs. The series definitely wears its inspirations on its sleeve. For the most part, it's great. The Walton File style animation is great, and I don't mind the occasional changing art styles because sometimes seeing this motherfucker so out of place kinda works. At other times, it's just like, that's the Gabriel voice from Mandela Catalog, even though the wolf has his own established voice. That's just the FNAF 2 static effect after you die. The sound is exactly the same. And there's some stock sound effects that really did distract. But I think it's the frequency and repetition of how the show uses these stock things that bothers me, as well as its repetition of scares. There's one moment that stuck with me because it was genuinely really creepy. With the wolf knocking on Grandma's door, and we just see her perspective, and it's just his eyes and teeth in the dark. That unnerved me. But then the jump scare happens, and it's like, okay, not necessary, I don't think. Right after is this really cool scene in the live action, or maybe just 3D animation that due to the low resolution looks live action, and the wolf is put there, which is creepy, yeah. But then it like pauses and goes all spooky, which would be fine if it wasn't happening the whole episode. Like, this moment in a vacuum is great, but in context it's tiring, because this has been happening the whole time. Or when the wolf attacks the second pig. It does all this shit, and there's this big dramatic noise when he lifts the first pig's decapitated head up to the window. Like, I think it would be really creepy instead of moderately creepy if he lifted up the head in silence, his eyes and teeth just slowly faded into view, and then it cut to black with the glass shattering noise. And it gets me because sometimes the horror is really damn good. Like, sticking to just the first episode, there's a few moments of just the wolf's face sliding in and out of view through a window. That shit's creepy, and I wish some stuff was just more subtle. Like, Red's death could have been complete silence with just like maybe even just a low sound as the wolf's face morphs suddenly and it just ends. But like the scream and the warping Red just isn't scary to me. I think it's a bit too much of that analog horror liquefy tool style jump scare for the 5th time in one episode. The like static noise at times seems to just end and loop, which is really distracting. It might be intentional but doesn't feel that way. The writing and presentation ranges from really good shit to really not. On one end of the extreme, Hansel's entire conflict with the wolf is great. Hansel immediately goes for the shot without hesitation. He survives for longer than he should because the wolf chooses to toy with him. It's great and gives both plenty of personality. Gretel's steadfast determination is well shown, and I like how ready she is to get shit done. It's also portrayed like a point-and-click video game, which isn't special, but isn't unwelcome either. But then there's like some of the dialogue early on being really weird. The witch going all, "Oh, you fell for the hallucinations of your brother that I gave you." Feels like both kind of lazy writing and also too over-explained for someone making this kind of monologue. It's like, I mean, I guess someone could say this, but it's really wordy. Almost like what a child would write in a story because they don't really understand how people talk. Or like the fucking book with the witch's weakness being in the witch's own house for some reason, instead of Gretel finding it elsewhere. Maybe the witch wanted to keep it away from people, so she kept it here, but like, the dialogue is really corny at times. I mean, I hope you die, and I just want to get out of here. Are not the most compelling final lines after the witch decapitates Hansel and Gretel shoots her in the head with a gun. At the end of the day though, it's the big bad wolf that makes this series really entertaining. The horror ranges from great to the editing and animation has some hiccups at times, but the wolf is always entertaining. Foxy does a good voice for the character, and he has so much personality in how he taunts and mocks his victims. This also means when the wolf died, I was a bit upset. Not just because his eyes seemed to magically grow back, and "Die, you bastard" was really funny to see pop up on screen, but because I was really watching to see more of this guy. That said, I also like how he establishes that he does have a tragic backstory and depth to him, but he doesn't even remotely regret his actions. He had a sad life, but he owns his murder and how shitty he is. So the reveal sets up the witch as an antagonist without making the wolf spin a sob story. I do like him. I think he's very entertaining and super well designed. Kinda like Bond, he really straddles that line between being too over the top and silly and genuinely terrifying. It somehow works out as a nice balance. Without the wolf, I think my overarching issues would have dragged this series down more than feels right. It does a lot right, enough that I wouldn't even scrape the edge of D or F tier, but I'd probably leave it at a C. However, the wolf is very prominent and always really entertaining to watch be a complete shit. And for that, I can give the series a B tier. It's a lot of good foundations that I think the creator could fine-tune into a spectacular analog horror. The bonus alternate endings are really fun though. Totally unnecessary, but shows a lot of passion that I can respect. Gretel just getting her neck snapped emotionlessly is really funny though. To be honest, so is the non-reaction from the villains in the Hansel Clutches ending. I don't actually think I'm equipped to analyze the June archive. I can tell you that it's gloriously animated with a few truly stunning looking sequences. I can say the voice acting for Fuzz the Cat is also really solid. However, I'm not someone who grew up with flip notes or the DS. My childhood handheld was the Game Boy, and as a result I feel like I'm missing all the context for this show. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't understand from experience how this thing shutting down can be such a big deal. I don't have those strong ties. I was watching these episodes thinking, yeah, it looks great and I'm sure it's good. But every moment of horror playing on what the viewer lost doesn't work on me. Whenever it goes, remember what you lost? It presupposes onto the viewer that they have any connection, which I just don't. A lot of the eye moments are like, oh no, Kirby got brutally murdered. That isn't really scary or spooky, it's just kind of funny to me. I'm gonna just kind of gloss over this a bit, because I did watch it, so I have to include it in the video, but I also think it'd be an unfair assessment coming from me to give it too critical a look. It's a really well animated and presented, but otherwise unremarkably confusing series, in my experience. But for any of the many people who actually had experienced this program and the community, this might be one of the best on this entire list. So in that regard, I think kinda like We'll Be Right Back from last year, I would highly recommend this to anyone in that group. Anyone who's into analog horror, which you clicked on this video, why wouldn't you be? Unless it's channel loyalty, in which case, cheers mate. And was like connected to Flipnotes and that community, I would highly recommend it. I would say go check it out. For me, it looks too damn nice to rank anywhere below a C tier. But as I said, yeah, check it out if you have any ties. And if the creator sees this, I'm really sorry. I'm just not in your target audience. I hope you understand. This is an analog horror about shipping. There's so much boat content here for any boat enthusiasts out there. This will make you full mast. I am unsure as to how much I enjoyed Project Britannica. And part of this is because there are moments where it shines. Any scene involving the series villain, the Mesh, tend to be really good. Whether it's a found footage scene or someone encountering it, or a distant shot of it clearly being connected to the sinking of a large vessel, I think it's fascinating because while it is kind of a generic giant meat monster of doom, there's something to be said for how it creates traps. It's a creature that spreads from boat to boat and basically integrates into the vessel. It becomes the boat and warps it to remove exits or mislead people with signs while consuming or killing them. And that's really neat, and I think it makes usage of the boat concept super well. There is a fear factor to the thought of being part of a group that's lost in the middle of nowhere, where the middle of nowhere is a sentient thing that wants you dead. That utter hopelessness of isolation and dread without being alone. However, that's only a small part of the episodes. A lot of Project Britannica scenes can be summed up with, look at this boat. Boy, I sure do like that boat. And now, the Titanic. As someone who's definitely not up to date on my boating lore, in fact my boat knowledge would be located on that giant boat iceberg at the top with, ironically, the Titanic and iconic Australian dickhead Clive Palmer's desired Titanic 2. The alternate history of boats is not really working much when I don't even know the history of boats. You know, the base form, the vanilla history of boats. I assume the RMS Lusitania didn't die of Titanic-itis at least. At the very least, this has been somewhat educational. I've googled a few boats that I didn't know about. But that's the thing. There's a lot of, here's a boat. Here's the inside of a boat. Here's a boat that sunk, but it didn't sunk in real life, so be creeped out or entertained. Which if the rest of the show didn't entertain me, well, whatever, slap it in D tier because I don't care about it. But instead, there's plenty of actually kinda cool stuff. I like a lot of the voice acting, I like the mesh, I like the underwater expedition. It's just not balanced well enough to me with the stuff that I can't even really criticize, because it's just nice looking shots of boats. Have you ever seen Star Trek the motion picture? I'm in the minority that actually kinda likes that movie, but it's probably most infamous for, 1, not being the Wrath of Khan, and 2, the fucking 10-year-long scene of Kirk staring at the new Enterprise made for the movie. Now that scene I can forgive. This was a huge moment after a decade of supplementary stuff after the show was taken down, but it kind of illustrates my issue on how just showing a nice looking thing for several minutes straight isn't really engaging. But the question remains, how much did I enjoy this? And the answer is, I did enjoy it. So it's not a D, and it's not an F. But I can't say I was super engaged. Neither story nor the horror were always doing it for me. The horror was here and there, the story was this and that. I think my final grade would be maybe a B tier. It's kinda skirting that line into a C, but the mesh is captivating enough that I like it. Plus, the Titanic reveal at the end of that one episode had the energy of like, the Einstein or Adolf reveals from Oppenheimer and The King's Man. 3 things I never thought I'd associate with one another, I'll be honest. When's the Titanic gonna get on an ERB against the Hindenburg, you fucking cowards? Is Chainmail Chasers analog horror? Not really. It's going back into that realm of digital horror that's just analog horror, but the time period is shifted forward. Is it good though? Hell yeah it is. I don't really think the horror is always there for me, I'll admit. In particular, the fucking like, scare theater music playing in the background on a lot of these is... It's about as scary as if like this whole segment was done in front of Lavender Town music. In fact, let's get that creepypasta music going. Let's get some Lavender Town syndrome going on here. There are great moments, in particular the stuff with Smile Dog that really sells the weirdness of the whole situation. The shifting JPEG, the changing GIF, the way he fucking busts out of the virtual machine and tells our protagonist to hop, skip, and go fuck herself. That's epic. Like, it looks great. And I do appreciate that the series is really easy to get attached to. Like, I'm a content creator, God save me, and I really appreciate that the fakey fake Chainmail Chasers finding the origins of creepypasta images series is really believable. Like, if you only showed someone a select few episodes of this show, it'd genuinely come across like a normal YouTube series. And frankly, basing it on Smile Dog, the literal haunted JPEG creepypasta, is a great idea. But, having the first 2 episodes be on Slender Man and Jeffrey Woods is great. Because if someone did this kind of series in real life, like genuinely, this is probably the order they do it. It would probably be these 3 in that order, and then the Rake 4th, who does end up being one of the next ones. That believability and how genuinely well played the character of Grace is, made the horror work way more than it would have otherwise, because I genuinely care about this character. And it's the characters and the storytelling that really makes it for me. The progression of things going to shit, the believability, how these characters balance being such massive dorks, but also responding understandably to what's going on. To the small things, like the intentional movie maker aesthetic, or how Grace's room starts to slowly look like the YouTube thumbnail Smile Dog image. The writing is so good. Like, I buy the main 3's dynamic, especially in the fucking hour-long epic they'd opened Season 2 with, which focused on the characters and how they respond to the terrifying events of the first season. My only issue is that right now, I kinda want to put Arthur through a drive-through microphone stand. Like, Grace can also be kind of a dick, but with all the shit she's been through, like, no shit she is. Grace deserves the biggest hugs, and Arthur deserves to be fed a couch. I mean, I know Smile Dog wants me to think that, and the whole point is that he's manipulating the video to only show the worst things Arthur said and none of the good, but shut up. And as an extra note, having Smile Dog, who manipulates technology, as the main villain, really helps explain why uploads keep happening. He's forcing them to happen just to fuck with Grace's head. But the way he calls her bitch I find really funny. But like, yeah, I'm totally into this villain for how he works as a good excuse to have things in episodes, and episodes in general where it wouldn't make sense otherwise. Like the cameraman characters in EverymanHYBRID, but actually a character this time. I feel like I really shouldn't like the episode where the characters do a bunch of problem solving for us, but I enjoy them, the characters, so I don't mind. I think this stands as a great example of how character can carry a show. Fucking S tier. I love it. Is it cheating because it's so connectable to what I do and the wheel happened to land on it while I was looking into the original Slenderman thread? Shut up. On a side note, I later found this. The creator is a power scaler, and given my usual content, by the way, please support this video, I'd love to do more like it. The creator might already know me, like not for certain, but it's technically possible, in which case, hi, now you understand why I made this post.
Alright, so, this is just to, prove to you.
Petscop it's a series that a lot of people love. I know that to be the case. It's one of the relatively small group of analog horrors, if it could be defined as such, that has hit over 1 million views on a single upload, let alone 5. One of which is the credits crawl for some reason. That's the fourth most viewed episode, which means more people have seen 3 episodes and then skipped straight to the credits than have actually watched the whole thing. For me though, Petscop was really carried by its aesthetic and its look. I think visually it's very solid. It looks great. This, Green Valley, and Ben Drown, which I might cover in a future video, really feel like what they're trying to evoke. But I think aside from the incredible production values, Petscop fell a little flat for me. The story was a bit confusing. After like the first few episodes, I had gotten completely lost, which doesn't really happen for me much often. Things happened that I didn't think had much rhyme or reason, and watching game theories and explain videos didn't really feel satisfying. They never felt like picking up pieces and putting them into places they were meant to be, but rather looking at 15 unrelated pieces and trying to string a narrative that sticks them together. It didn't enthrall me, and at a certain point, I was only watching Petscop for the sake of making this part of the video. I was bored out of my mind. It was a bunch of generic creepypasta, guy goes to a place in a game and something spooky adjacent happens. And that's not really aided by Paul. Paul is the central character playing this game, and is an anomaly of criticism for me, because when he's present, I don't like him much. He's charming in a stupid brain-dead idiot way, but also anytime there's something even remotely spooky, he's like, well, that was spooky, which ruins any attempts at horror. I was never even slightly unnerved when he was around, because he's just constantly yapping. So when he disappears for most of the second half, that should make it better, right? Well, no! At that point, I'd gotten used to him, so his vanishing felt so confusing to me. I get that he was like unnerved and lacking the same pep in his step, or maybe it wasn't even him playing the game, whatever. But I just don't think the second half scares are as well done, so that doesn't help. There are a few moments he works for me. His nonchalant lol that happened, deadpan snark in the face of every fucking scare, makes the few times he doesn't do that more impactful, but that's few and far between. Then there's all the censored boxes, which at first I get, he saw something so personal he didn't want to share it. That's creepy. At a certain point though, you wonder why he's even uploading shit if he's going to be pulling crap like this. I did not care for Petscop. I think its story is interesting if explained to you by someone with more time on their hands. It's about as scary as watching any horror thing while someone is cracking jokes and remarks all the time, and it's kind of carried purely for me by the ability to point and look and go, that looks fucking great. It doesn't help that it feels like at a certain point the story kind of shifts. It's hard to explain, but I felt by episode 11 or 12 something just changed in the writing. I can't put my finger on it, and that frustrates me. This really upsets me, honestly, because Petscop was one of the series I was most excited to get to on this ranking, and I didn't care for it much. It's not bad, I still enjoyed chunks of it, I just didn't feel that strongly. Like, I even spent some time rewatching some of it to see if maybe I was missing something, but I think it's just a show that didn't vibe with me. I'm sorry, but this is a C tier for me. On a side note, is there any reason for the time codes up to episode 11 to be, like, different from the actual link for the video? Was stuff cut out after the upload? This is a hood classic, 17 years old, and kinda shit. Like, okay, yeah, the editing for the time in the pre-2010s is pretty fucking good. However, I just can't fucking take this camera work. The way it moves around and shifts makes it so obvious that it's fake, and it's the main reason I was so skeptical back in the day. Yeah, back when you wanted to believe this shit. I still didn't buy it because it's so stupidly moving. Like, it's hard to believe and kinda hilarious, and that's all I have to say. Username 666 I thought would give me more to work with, but it didn't. This is a stunningly mediocre project today, and only made moderately more impressive for its legacy and editing quality. I'm sorry, but this is a D tier. I will give it enough of a pass to move it up, but it's one I never cared for, and I still don't. First we had found footage, and now we have CRT Anomalies. We really ran out of raw fucking names on the first 51 shows, didn't we? What am I saying? Last time I had Sinkhole and Nobody. CRT Anomalies is somehow older than the Monument mythos, and yet nobody talks about it. That's not to say it's as good as that series, but it is decent. I think it has an interesting base concept, and oddly enough, balances out its outlandish ghoul monster episodes with horror so based in reality that it's just really freaky to think about. We have MK Ultra, but not described in jokey ways or by MatPat, but rather described in clinical and cold ways, detached from emotion. We have a plane crash where the exact reason isn't specified as of now, so it could be unnatural or just a plane crash, and planes terrify me, I'm never getting on one. Then there's the fucking Catholic puppet show that literally just expresses the view of certain traditional Catholics, to be clear, not all Catholics, just the ones who don't deserve the grace of the Lord, on gay people. It's genuinely unnerving how, until the overarching plot gets involved, it's hard to tell if this is a really old children's show nobody remembers or not. Because an episode that's just the lesson of gay people don't deserve to exist unless they stop being gay, articulated in a way that a child might understand, setting them on a terrible path, is honestly so believable in reality. It was like concerning. I was like, shit, is this like an actual old show from like extreme groups? Jesus. Where I have to say the issue comes in though is that it really doesn't like have much. It's only a few episodes and they tell small snippets of an overarching story. And with us being 2 years removed from the last one with no updates as far as I can see, I don't know if this is it or not. If it is, well, it's an enjoyable short watch that's not amazing but pretty damn good. If it isn't, I want to see where it goes. For now, I think a low A tier is fair.
Dr. Nowhere's Office of Wonders presents the Oddity Compendium of the
And here we are, the big number 50, the Oddity Compendium. This is a currently one episode Dr. Nowhere production that is pretty good. I wasn't super into it at first. I think the voice is way funnier than it was scary, because I just imagined like this whole thing as an analog horror YouTube poop, remember when those existed? But I think the actual monsters shown and the mixture of comedy and scary was well balanced. I fucking love this freak at the end, completely random with no relation to anything but very endearing. I really like the whole bit with the guy who had his head torn off and his face can't be shown because it just doesn't exist in our reality anymore. That was creative. And the episode very much grows with time into a really interesting compendium. There's not much more I have to say beyond that. It definitely didn't inspire me as much as I would have liked, but I enjoyed it anyway. I think we'll end this video off with a B tier. Also, you might think, motherfucker, I was actually intending to extend this video by 10 entries to make up for the amount of one-shot analog horrors, but now at the end, I don't think I need to. Not only did I recover what I already looked at last time, but I think I seriously underestimated how much I'd have to say about some of these one-shots. But I still want to do a bit extra, so we're gonna have 2 more for this video. 2 more.
Have you ever heard of the Inverted Man? If not, then allow me to tell you everything
I seriously forgot to include more Vintage 8 in this one, which is weird because they did put out some new stuff. So, I quickly decided to throw in the one-shot that had the most interesting name to me. And it was alright. I didn't see that it was only 1 minute long. It is a simple limerick describing a potentially dangerous thing that is an upside-down man made of broken. I know what else to say, I wasn't scared, I was kind of intrigued. Yeah. B tier.
To you, the residents of Concreta, this is a call to R.O.T.
The Lord must have been pleased with how much I loved Angel here, because the spinner saved R.O.T. for number 52. The big final entry to this ranking by the creators is one of the objectively best things ever made. I will have no arguments. R.O.T. is such a stylistic and tonal departure from Angel here, in a way that just perfectly demonstrates to me the genuine skill behind these creators. A science fiction digital horror based around a space station with laws, customs, and systems that we today wouldn't deem as wholly morally just. Focusing on the justice system in particular, and the way in which it handles all of its criminals. They are introduced publicly to the entire station, to which some may ask a set of questions and gauge their responses before they're chosen either to be released back into the station, with extra surveillance and no more access to whatever helped them commit the crime, ostracized and sent to an almost certain death sentence on a shithole planet to try and survive, or termination, where they fucking die. And I think this system is kind of fascinating from a philosophical standpoint. This kind of asks the question of what system could we have in place in a world where imprisonment is too inconvenient and resource heavy. I don't actually remember if they explained why they don't have a prison option, but if not, I'm assuming it's just too resource heavy and everyone on the station needs to be contributing. 2 of the 3 options are death, and morally it's hard to argue which, if any of these, are the best option. We've already seen a character multiple times in this position, meaning it's completely realistic in this world for repeat offences from an individual. But if the risk of another offence isn't taken, then reformation is completely off the table. And to what degree is there any difference between being ostracised or terminated? We're told there's basically no hope of survival on that planet. Does giving these people a potentially more drawn out death with false hope really count as better than just a Mogus ejecting them solely because it's not directly by our hand that they die? I also think it's really interesting that this justice system is entirely divorced from proving guilt. It is an inherently biased system that implies guilt. They tell us that the person is guilty, and while they get to plead, we're told that they are biased. Unlike the justice system itself, which is obviously impartial, even in the episodes where the officer is blatantly and obviously biased. These are all questions raised simply by the nature of the show. And it helps that the actual episodes are entertaining enough for this not to feel like subtext over text. Not only is this series visually wonderful, with plenty of nice shots and a very interesting base setup that 100% could make for an absolutely banger Papers, Please-esque game, I'm also really endeared to how it disseminates world building. I remember in 2023, I had a feature-length new media video where how natural Mass Effect was with its world building, never turning to camera and explaining anything to the audience unless the player specifically chose to have Shepard ask about it. So you play as Shepard and you decide how much they already know. Everything else is conveyed in natural ways that feel like real conversations between people, to which this is how things are. R.O.T gives me a similar vibe. We are explained the system we're working on for the interactive element, which I'll elaborate on later, but everything else is explained to us either as answers to questions given by the audience, which makes sense as you can assume not everyone on this station is aware of everything, or given to us simply from what the characters say to build up this world. It's easy to be immersed in R.O.T, and I enjoy that so much about it. What makes this show particularly unique, though, is that the people voting for the character's survival are you. The audience decides, and that's really interesting to me. It adds an interactive element that I have personally yet to engage with because I have social anxiety, in a way that is uniquely separate from the ARG seen elsewhere in this series of reviews. It's not a one-way streak where the ARG gives you a puzzle to solve. This gives you a route to influence the story. The story is, in theory, influenced by the audience. I am assuming that the story can be influenced because otherwise the story is already set in stone and the voting is just an illusion of choice to make the viewer feel more engaged. Honestly though, it would be an insanely big brain move to have an obviously rigged vote at some point, to really hit that social commentary on the justice system that feigns a complex system while instead presenting a simplistic binary between you're free and your life is ruined. I'm just saying, that can make for a great story point where there's just a very obviously, false vote, but with no evidence for it, and then later down the line they can show the real votes that the fans made, and, have that as, a part of the story. The audience wasn't heard. The people on the station weren't given that voice that they were told they were given. I'm just suggesting, just saying. Anyway, I've yapped about this show maybe more than I should have, because in many ways, beyond raising moral questions and the entertaining presentation, it doesn't so far get much more complex than a series of episodes with the exact same setup every time, and that's it. I don't think that's a criticism. The setup is genuinely one that could be extended for, ever. The only thing stopping it from going on forever is the limit of only 7,000 odd people being on the station. There's so much potential and variety to be used here, but I am all for it. I genuinely really enjoyed R.O.T. It got my brain folds wiggling and tickled my grey matter, but I don't think I can give it that S tier yet. And my reasoning is that I want to see where the show goes first. Because it would be very easy for it to fall into the hole of repetition that stagnates it, as it is easy enough for it to continue being varied and grow further, but it can be repetitive. Not in a bad way currently, but it can get there. There's a fine line between an entertaining episodic series and a repetitive one-trick pony. I have faith, however, that it won't come to that. This is a temporary A tier, because I feel certain it will only get higher in time. Is this where I plug myself as open to voice act again, or was once enough? I'm hearing once was enough? Alright, fair enough. I'm hearing to shut up. Okay, this has gone on for 2 hours. Speaking of voice acting, I just gotta say, you can't just get Angel Gabby herself to voice the officer. Are you trying to predispose us to be biased in her favor? Come on. And so, we finished this video. Once more, here's the tier list. Here it is ordered from favorite to least favorite, and here are my final thoughts. Once more, I'm reminded of the potential in analog horror and its closely related sister genre of digital horror. They're rife with possibility due to the sliding scope of the scale. Small-scale found footage that focuses on an individual's surrounding life the larger scale news broadcasts that convey much bigger nationwide concepts than you'd often see in media. There was a lot to like here, and I'm excited not just to get this video out, but even for next year's video. I would love for this to be a tradition, but I don't know if there's enough to make yet another 50 series long one. Next year, I have a theme I want to look at though. Analog horrors based on existing series. Analog horror fan fiction, you could say. I've got a few on the plate. The Bat, FNAF VHS, Nixonverse Retold, Chainmail we can skip that one. Give me your recommendations, both on this and in general, whatever comes next, to just build up another set of entries for the following years, you know? It doesn't have to be 50 either. I could do like 25 analog horrors based on existing things. You never know. Now I think I've said enough for today, and I'll see you on a later date. Have a good one, fellas. And there is the analog horror video. I hope everyone enjoyed that, because I had a great time making it. Please tell me what you thought. Give me recommendations down below, as I'm pretty sure I said at the ending. I'm recording this a good bit after finishing it, because I got a really early jump on this to make sure it was out in time, because I wasn't sure if it would be, and it feels good. It feels good to get some content out, you know? Like, oh man, I had so much fun. So yeah, give me recommendations in general for analog horrors that I haven't seen, and also for next year's theme of ones based on other stuff. I got plenty of things. The Bat, the Spider, some of the Nixonverse retolds, you know, plenty of ideas. Just, you know, nothing with generative AI. I don't like that at all, especially my analog horrors. So just, you know, give me some fun stuff, and I'll check it out, and I'll do this again next year. This is a great, enjoyable time. I have a lot of fun. Thank you everyone for supporting me on Patreon. You guys are legendary. And if you want to support me, you can. It's linked in the description. You will get access to my Patreon-only Discord, where you can make me say stupid stuff. And, of course, if you're in the Discord and you have any analog horror recommendations, just let me know, and I'll keep it in mind. I've got over 20 different options for next year's theme, so depending on how many I get, I might be able to do another whole 50 and get us to 150 analog horrors. This is a big genre of stuff, but you know what? It's great to see people being creative. It's great to see people using the limitations of the format. It's great to see people who don't necessarily have the super up to the top tier editing skills just doing what they can and learning through this experience and making these series how to do better and how to improve. And man, it's so beautiful to see these people just get their ideas out there, because in analog horror, you don't need to have the huge budget or the huge skill to get your ideas out there. All you need is the dedication. So yeah, if you're in my Discord, you know to make me say stupid stuff, which we're gonna do now. My name is Nemesis, and I'm here to what the fuck, did you see that? Shut up, bozo. Curse of Ra! Oi mate, lock the fuck in! Thursday. It's kind of weird thing where he talks. Historically speaking, who historically speaking came up with the first analog horror or naming? Okay, so the phrase analog horror comes from Local 58. It's from one of the update videos that was like analog horror coming soon sort of deal. Like it was like more of it coming. That's where the word analog horror comes from. The first analog horror is hard to say because there's many different ways you can look at it. So obviously Local 58 started the name. Like, the word analog horror first comes from Local 58. CHSS is also in the running. Before Local 58, you have Marble Hornets, and No Through Road, which are more found footage but have the tape set up that Local 58 would kind of expand on a lot more into the true analog. It's still analog, but it's definitely not the currently known model of analog. It's like a more proto-analog horror. And then you go back further, Username 666 is an analog, but it is digital horror, which is the sister to analog horror. They're both horror built on footage of a screen. It's just the specific era that they tackle is different. They're both in the same group, but they're from different time periods. But the first true analog horror, in my opinion, is Agamemnon Counterpart, which also predates all of these, as it is from 2006. And not just, it's also 2 months before the Wyoming Incident. And that is also one of the older ones. So Agamemnon Counterpart is kind of the first. It has the tape format, it plays like a tape, it's that's the whole setup. Is what you're seeing is a different tape, but it's implied to be inspired by that tape, and it has all the glitch effects, and they still look great to this day. So I would say the way that I would answer what is the first analog horror, the origin of the concept is an Agamemnon Counterpart in 2006. The extension of the tape concept was popularized in 2009 with No Through Road and Marble Hornets, and then the first true usages of analog horror in the way we know it today comes from Local 58, which also created the name analog horror. And from Local 58 onwards, you get CHSS, ECKVA, Blue Channel, Analog Archives, as well, especially, and then eventually you move on and you get to the modern big hitters. And by modern, I mean like fucking 2019 onwards big hitters in Gemini Home Entertainment, the Monument Mythos, and the Mandela Catalog, as well as some other fringe examples that aren't quite analog horror but kind of fit in there, like Petscop and Boave. Well, no, Petscop just does count. It just does count. It is all tapes, but like Boave is a fringe like example of the sort of stylings, but it's also very much its own thing. So yeah, that would be my answer to it. It's definitely not a very simple answer, but it'll do. My favorite water, though, is cold water. Analog horror, more like analog borer. Got him. I do love scorpions, so that's pretty cool. Luckily, most, if not all, but a handful are not deadly at all. So you could be hurt picking one up, and you shouldn't pick one up, but at least you probably won't die like with a snake. Analog, what's her records about? You bring a genuine aura. I don't know how to do that. Oh. Well, I guess we're ending on FNAF, which makes sense. I feel like the FNAF VHS series are going to be among the most requested for the next one. And yes, don't worry, I have a FNAF VHS series on there, and it will be looked at. So, yeah. As I said, hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Have a great one. Happy Halloween.